Hey guys, Halo213 here with another stream, and today you're probably wondering, what's with the music? Why is it so down? Well, before I get into that, I'd like to say those who are watching on YouTube, this was a live stream I did, and a live stream I've been waiting for a while. I know I normally go from 6 to 7 for about 3 hours on Twitch. This is kind of a different content for streaming, but it's still there. This is, for those who are watching on Twitch, the people I'm talking about on YouTube is pretty much, what's it called? For those who are watching on YouTube or Twitch, this is pretty much a past broadcast, so it'll probably go up on my YouTube channel at Halo213 I do upload other content on there. But today, I thought I'd do something interesting. So again, going back to this music, I'm doing something that's not really like normal to do, but so for those who don't know, on Reddit there is a subreddit called No Sleep, and basically what that is just a bunch of horror stories that people tell, and hence the name, you're supposed to get no sleep. So what I thought would be an interesting idea is, while I'm doing this indie game called Coloring Pixels, which I do like art, so I thought it would be fun to do, I would obviously be pretty boring with just me sitting there doing pixel art, that I would play some of those stories from the Reddit page using a text-to-speech program I found online for free, and have it read off the stories for us while we're doing this. So yeah, so I just thought it would be interesting, and who doesn't like horror stories, am I right? So yeah, we're gonna get right into this. I actually already have one set up because I was digging through Reddit or No Sleep, and this one's called Life's Tough When Your Best Friend is a Serial Killer. That's the title. It will start off with that sentence, but yeah, so let me just flip over to the game and we'll get into this. I'll probably let's start off with something simple here. We'll do a heart, why not? Heart doesn't look simple. And I'll flip through them as the story's going, but let me just start up the story here. Okay. Here we go.
I came from a strict but
sorry, I also was playing it to make sure it worked.
Life's tough when your best friend is a serial killer. Still, once we started playing together, we just couldn't stop. Nobody cared much at first, not even my own family. But as we got older and hit upper elementary, we became inseparable. That's when my parents began to worry. I don't think they worried about Tom so much. Despite the faults in his upbringing, he was always a good kid, very nice to me, and we played well together. They did, however, worry about his parents. To that end, we only ever hung out at school. Eventually, we made it to high school, and by that time everyone had accepted that we were best friends for life. My parents struggled with that, but eventually they relaxed. Sometimes, they'd even let Tom and me hang out around town, although they kept a close eye on us. What do I like about Tom? Everything. I like the way he twitches his nose before he sneezes, and the way he bounces on the balls of his feet when he's excited to tell me something. I like his brown, curly hair and the freckles dusting his cheeks. I like that he's the first person I see at school every day, and the last person I say goodbye to each night. Those feelings didn't change when the murders started happening. David was the first person to die. He was a grade older than Tom and me, and he bullied Tom mercilessly. Tom was an easy target. He didn't have a lot of money, he was awkward, and I was really his only friend. He attracted bullies like flies to honey. One day after school, David cornered Tom in the parking lot and punched him in the face. No warning, no reason, just punched him as hard as he could. He probably would have kept going, but I caught him in the act and raised hell about it, shouting for help and screaming at him. David took off and I dragged Tom to the nurse's office just as his eyes started to swell. He was extremely calm while the nurse treated him, but his silence was telling. He didn't stick around to hang out with me afterwards. He went straight home without saying a word. The next day, David was found dead at the local park. It wasn't a clean job by any means. Had been stabbed multiple times in the stomach and had eventually bled to death. Everyone was in shock. Our town isn't exactly huge, and murders aren't commonplace. School was cancelled and the cops began investigation. Unfortunately for David and his family, they had no idea what they were doing. You'd like to think that all cops are trained to handle a crime scene properly, but cops in a small town never really expect to have to do something like that. They barely gathered any evidence, and what they did manage to gather, they contaminated. There were rumors. Everyone at school knew that David had attacked Tom after school the day before. For a few days, people looked at Tom funny in the hallways. But David was a well-known bully, and Tom was far from the only kid that he harassed. It could have been anyone at school. Hell, it could have been anyone in town. David's bullshit wasn't confined to our school alone. As for Tom and me, well, we never talked about what happened to David. We just kept living our lives as normal, both of us silently glad that that fucker was dead. The case dragged on, but it became clear that the cops were never going to find who did it. Eventually, people got tired of talking about it, and we all moved on. The next murder occurred several months later. This time it was a girl from our school named Stephanie. She was strange. She was pretty and smart and sort of popular, but that was never enough for her. She always wanted more. If you ask me, I think she was really insecure. And she hated me. She had hated me ever since we were in 7th grade and I got the part in the school play that she'd wanted. She was really the only person who tried bullying me in school. For the most part, I didn't let it bother me. I ignored her petty crap and went on with my life. Tom never understood that. "Why don't you stand up to her?" he asked me once. "What's the point?" I shrugged. "She doesn't bother me that much anyway. Besides, ignoring her makes her even more angry." Stephanie was found in a dumpster behind one of the town bars. She, too, had been stabbed, but the wounds were more precise this time. She had taken a knife to the jugular and had bled out in minutes. Once again, the police investigated. Once again, they came up with nothing. Once again, people started looking at Tom funny. It was common knowledge that Stephanie was obsessed with me. That she'd been bothering me all these years. And a few months after Tom's bully ended up dead, she met the same fate. Theories started forming. People thought of Tom as my knight in shining, blood-soaked armor. Just like before, Tom and I didn't talk about Stephanie's murder. I think Tom wanted to. A few times over lunch, he glanced up at me, opened his mouth and then averted his eyes and changed the subject. As though he couldn't quite bring himself to say it. I didn't mind. As far as I was concerned, there was nothing to be said. We both understood each other, without words, anyway. No matter what happened, nothing would change between us. The third and most recent murder happened only a month after Stephanie's. This time, it was a person with no obvious connection to Tom or to me. The town drunk, Lester, was found dead. Stabbed to death. He was a nuisance to everybody, especially the girls in town, who he liked to catcall and occasionally stalk, and the town is better for his absence. Even though Tom never had any dealings with Lester, he was called in and questioned by the police. Fortunately, I was able to provide him with a bulletproof alibi. Tom and I, you see, had gone to see a movie the night before in the town over. I even showed the cops our ticket stubs. Never mind that Tom and I had never been to a movie together, for my parents' paranoia. Never mind that the ticket stubs were actually from my younger sister and me. The cops didn't have to know that. They accepted my word without question. After all, I was a good, trustworthy kid, and agreed that they would keep my involvement a secret. I told them I was afraid of repercussions from the other students. In reality, I couldn't let my parents know what I'd done. They'd know I had lied immediately. Tom was released and the cops assured everyone of his innocence. Still, the kids at school wouldn't look to him. Nobody wanted to talk to him. I don't think that bothered him much. After all, nobody had really talked to him before. Except for me. This time around, Tom was bursting to talk to me about it. All of it. I wasn't quite sure why. Like I said, words were often unnecessary between us. Both of us knew where we stood, knew what was happening and why. But I care about Tom and, hell, if you really wanted to do this, well, do it. A few nights after Lester's murder, I snuck out of the house. I made my way across town, not stopping until I was outside Tom's bedroom window. I knocked quietly and he appeared almost instantly, as though he'd been expecting me. A few minutes later, we were sitting in his backyard, talking in low voices. "This doesn't change anything between us," I said. He shifted nervously beside me, and I tried to sound as sincere as I felt. "You're still my best friend. Everything is just like it was." I could sense him shake his head. "You know that's not true. Things can't go on like this for much longer." I bristled. "Why not? The cops here have no idea what they're doing. They'll never figure it out. People can talk all they want without evidence, they can't do shit." He sighed. "People will figure it out. Eventually, something will slip through the cracks, and it'll be all over." We sat in silence for a few moments. I hated it, but he was right. Finally, I answered him. "Fine. You've made your point. I'll be more careful next time." "Next time," he said, disapproval clear in his voice. "I mean, if there's a next time," I amended. "If people leave us alone, there'll be no need for it." "You don't have to protect me," he said. "I know, but I'm going to anyway." At that, I stood up. "I better get home before my parents figure out I'm gone. See you at school tomorrow." "Sounds good." Tom climbed back in his bedroom window, then turned back to me and whispered, "Don't forget what you said." I rolled my eyes. I promise." "You worry too much." He closed his window and I started the long walk back home, my right hand in my pocket, tracing the sharp edge of my favorite knife. Life's tough when your best friend's a serial killer. Honestly, I don't know how Tom does it.
I think that was either that one. So that was Life's Toughest Best Friend, the serial killer. So that was crazy insane. Also, we'll say in the beginning of that story, sorry, I was what they're called. I forgot to switch onto the game so you could see me drawing. For those who are actually watching the stream, that was crazy. Holy shit! Like, this is some deep shit. Yeah, that was crazy. Honestly, like, from that story alone, I don't think I could. I don't think I could. That's just freaky. Like, having a friend as a serial killer, I would lose my shit. Just to clarify, I did put a filter on my gameplay, so if it does seem a bit more extremely less saturated, that's because I did that for that purposeful reason. But yeah, next one I'm going to play here is called Monster Hunting and Other Invertible Behavior. I don't know what that means, but we're about to find out. So we just cut all this story out. Again, to me these are interesting because it's like, it's basically just having a story read to you, you know? Anyway, here we go.
3:30 p.m. One September 1 three-person party entered the Rio Grande National Forest in Hinsdale County, Colorado. They consisted of Trevor NYSON 37 years old and Matilda NYSON 33 years old, a married couple, and Benny NYSON 8 years old, their only son. 5:31 p.m. 1 September Trevor and Matilda, highly distraught, encountered a Forest Service ranger to report their son missing. They could offer no details beyond "we turned around, and he was gone." Matilda experienced a panic attack shortly thereafter, and had to be treated on-site with 20 milligrams of benzodiazepine. 5:33 p.m. 1 September U.S. Department of Interior, Bureau of Uncategorized Duabu was contacted. 5:46 p.m. 1 September ACH-47 Chinook helicopter landed 13 miles SSE of Lake City, CO. Trevor and an impaired Matilda were presented to Duabu agents for interrogation. 5:47 p.m. 1 September Based on the information presented, Duabu agents confirmed cryptic contact. That's where I come in. Did you know that Hinsdale, Colorado is the most isolated place in the lower 48? There are fewer roads per capita, and longer distances between them, than any other place. Have you ever wondered how people felt upon discovering that monsters were real? The British Museum assumed in 1799 that the platypus specimen before them was an obvious joke. Nordic seafarers feared the terrible kraken, leaving us to laugh at their primordial beliefs before considering the subsequent modern discovery of the colossal squid. None of this mattered to Trevor, who kept chewing on his hair, or Matilda, who was staring placidly at some nearby leaves. We've established that last contact with Benny was at 37.887 degrees north latitude, 107.214 degrees west longitude, at 3:33 p.m. What more can you tell me about the departure? I asked crisply. Who are you? Matilda responded in an airy sort of way. That's not important right now, I shot back. I need to know the circumstances surrounding your son's departure. Trevor looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. Departure? You keep saying that word. And how do you know so many specifics? His delayed speech and increased breathing indicated the early warning signs of shock. I regarded him stoically. The sun will set at 7:29 p.m. tonight. Overnight temperatures could drop as low as 59 degrees, which presents a potentially extreme danger to an exposed 8-year-old boy. And the public is unaware of the wildlife that has been documented in Rio Grande National Forest. Each minute spent conversing about mundane nonsense is a minute of daylight wasted. Now tell me, did your son have any food? Trevor stared back in broken defeat, his eyes rimmed with tears. Just gummy bears. I grabbed for my radio. Get the Chinook ready to fly, now. Matilda spun her head toward me as I prepared to run. Who are you? Call me Lisa, I shot back. Now get the fuck out of my way. The chopper landed me as close to the coordinates as was humanly possible. I had to jump the last 6 feet straight onto the ground. The crew flew away immediately afterward. We couldn't afford the risk of scaring it off. Besides, I didn't need them hanging around. All necessary equipment had been packed ahead of time. I found the family's trail almost instantly. There was a path of broken twigs, scattered dirt, and even a discarded trail mix wrapper. I followed their marks cautiously, scanning every inch. It didn't take long for me to find it. An unnatural rise in the grass had snaked its way toward the path that I'd been traversing. If I hadn't been looking for it explicitly, well, I might have stepped right on it. I listened. The birds were quiet. No crepuscular animals were stirring. Even the wind was holding itself at bay. I tried to silence my own breathing, but my elevated heart rate prohibited such an endeavor. I looked across the rolling landscape toward the setting sun. It really was beautiful. Root beer floats were inspired by Colorado sunsets. I thought of this fact and worked to calm myself. It had a moderate effect. I reached slowly into my pocket, immensely thankful that I had packed everything I would need. I extracted said equipment, then looked down at my trembling hand. Gummy bears. Only red ones, for the love of God. And definitely no greens. I tossed a handful onto the artificial rise in the grass. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the rise coiled around the candy, closing in like a snake, and retracted. I didn't realize how frozen I had become until my head swam from a lack of oxygen. Then I sprang into action, moving my legs to follow the retreating rise in the ground. It disappeared into a copse of trees, then vanished from sight. I stared at the plants before me. No, not plants. At least, not all of them. Broken fir rose in vertical lines along the edges of the trees. The brownish hue blended well with the bark. I wasn't fooled. I stared up at the point where the fir stopped. It towered at least 7 feet above the ground, much higher than my 5'2" frame. I listened. It breathed. Look, I offered shakily, pulling out a fistful of red gummy bears. There's plenty more. I dropped them from my trembling hands onto the ground at my feet. There was a snort. Then a large head emerged from the shadows. It was covered in thick, soft, brown fur. Its 2 eyes, both 5 inches across, were jet black. 2 tiny triangular ears sat atop its skull. There was no visible nose. And its razor-sharp canines would have presented an imposing threat, if it weren't for the fact that they were misaligned in a massive, crooked underbite. FFFFFSSSSNUUUUU. It asked. Then it reached out a massive paw, clearly focused on my gummy bears. Whoa, I shouted, trying to look more intimidated than I felt. I stepped protectively over the candy. He snatched his paw back like I'd burned it. His eyes glistened as his lower lip began to tremble and drool. No, I yelled, pressing my advantage. Give me the boy. I stepped forward, causing him to flinch and raise his paws in a protective stance. It was almost funny, this bipedal monster was defending itself from something 1/10 its size. But to him, I supposed the term monster would be entirely relative. Give him to me. I screamed again, and he scurried into the bushes. Cautiously, I followed. He hadn't gone far. I could see his brown fur trembling in the dark. I leaned in. Benny Nyson, 8 years old, lay sleeping in the fetal position. A furry arm rested on top of him. I slowly reached for the bag of gummy bears. More slowly still, I raised them up in front of me. I pointed to the boy. And he understood. Benny woke up as the monster handed him to me. He began to panic. Shush, I offered as I completed the solemn exchange. I grabbed Benny tight as the giant paws rolled him into my arms. He looked around wildly. I quickly grabbed a bottle of water, opened it, and practically forced it down his throat. After a moment of panic, he began to drink like a baby finding its bottle. A few feet away, I heard the distinct sounds of a monster devouring candy. Benny finished the water, rolled out of my arms, and looked up at me. Who are you? He asked incredulously. For the first time, I smiled. Lisa McMurray of Doaboo. You know, you're just like your mother. He looked at me in confusion. Are you an angel? No, not at all, I explained. I work for the U.S. government. He seemed to understand. I search for cryptids, I elaborated. They're what you would call monsters. After spending nearly all of human history hiding in the shadows, they've run out of places to go. Cryptids are terrified of humans, and rightly so, so they've been relegated to the status of legend. Unfortunately, their natural habitat is essentially eradicated. Their only hope of survival is within the government's environmental niche replication program, which is basically a classified government zoo. We're currently maintaining breeding programs for several wild monsters. The one that you found for us, here I pointed to the grunts coming from the bushes, loves your gummy bears. It's why he took you from your parents. He looked in confusion at the enormous fuzzy brown rear end poking out of the leaves. Is he dangerous? For the first time, I laughed. Oh, no. He's essentially a giant puppy hamster. He's strong enough to rip a truck apart, but doesn't understand how to hurt things. That's why it's so dangerous for him to be around humans, who specialize in hurt. The slurping, smacking noise that came from the shadows began to slow its pace. I placed Benny on the ground. He remained in a sitting position, grabbing his head as though in confusion. So there's a secret government plot to capture monsters? Cryptids, I corrected. Yes. The one you just met is eating red gummy bears that have been prepared with a heavy sedative. He should be ready any minute now. Right on cue, there was a loud thump. Benny and I both looked up to find that the monster had collapsed just feet in front of us, and was now snoring quietly. The overwhelming shock of the situation was keeping Benny subdued. So he continued. Why would you tell me all of this? I smiled sadly at him. Because the water you just drank was laced as well. Yeah, I'll be out in less than a minute, and you won't remember a single thing about what we discussed when you're reunited with your parents. I think he was trying to give me an angry look, but it was just impossible with his eyelids fluttering so much. His head lolled once, twice, 3 times, before finally coming to a rest on his shoulder. I gently grabbed him, then helped him to lie on the ground. He pushed me away at first, but eventually settled on sucking his thumb instead. I stood up and looked down at the 2 sleeping creatures. Mission fucking accomplished. I whipped out my radio. I need an extraction team ASAP. The primary target has been found near the coordinates of deposit. Equip the Chinook to carry 1 small, mid-class cryptid. And alert Cheyenne Mountain Complex that we have a package for delivery. This is important. You'll need 1 large bag of red gummy bears. I looked down at the boy.
He had snuggled up to the monster, and was now acting as the little spoon.
So guys,
Or as the teddy bear, depending on your point of view. I sighed, then spoke into the radio once more. Tell Cheyenne that we'd better make it 2 large bags of gummy bears. I signed off and stepped out of the shadows. It was 7:29 p.m. The sun was saying good night. It really was beautiful, I decided. Like all the world was a root beer float.
So that was that one. That was very interesting. So that was talk about the government secretly having like a government plan to hold out monsters. So I thought it was interesting. But yeah, so far these are actually kind of just nice to hear. Let's see here. Let's do... here we go. Be careful during the Hungry Ghost Festival, please. Let's do this story. This one looks interesting. Why not? And again, I just like listening to these because it's a story, right? So it's actually fairly interesting to listen to.
It's that time of the year again. A month long of ashes flying all over the place. A month long of obnoxiously loud get-high singers bawling whistle register notes at the top of their lungs till 10 p.m. every night. A month long of the odor of burning hell money and jasmine-scented joss sticks infusing the country. Yep. Those who observe the Hungry Ghost Festival will know what I mean. Personally, I don't observe the Hungry Ghost Festival, because I don't believe in ghosts and such. A short introduction of the Hungry Ghost Festival to those who don't know: it takes place during the whole of the Chinese 7th month. People believe that the gates of hell will open, and then the spirits are released to wander around for a month. Normally, people will leave food offerings out for these ghosts to appease them, usually on the side of pavements or roads, so that they don't drag the live people down into hell with them when they return. People will also burn hell money, which is basically just paper that will turn into currency for the ghosts to use in the underworld. How much hell money you burn for your ancestors is sort of a measure of how filial you are. Another version I heard from my friend is that these ghosts are people who had been uncared and unprovided for when they were alive. And so these food offerings are to provide for them and appease them, so that they do not disturb the living. It's considered taboo to step on any of the offerings or hell money ashes left on the roadside. People say that if you do accidentally step on any of those, just apologize and move on, or you will fall sick, or get possessed, or something. Even though I don't believe I will get harmed, I still tend to avoid stepping on anything in order not to seem disrespectful. To date, I do not remember ever having stepped on any offerings, joss sticks or ashes. Anyway, story time. This just happened last week. I was walking with my sister to a nearby shopping mall. There were two ways to get there. One way was through a hawker center. Look it up, it's a must to visit one of these and try the food if you ever come to Singapore. The other way was through an open parking area. Normally we walk through the hawker center because it's nearer. But during the Hungry Ghost Festival, most of the hawkers will set up little shrines in their stalls, plus one big collective one just outside. As a result, the collective fumes of the joss sticks are almost unbearable for both my sister and I, who have sensitive respiratory tracts. And so, to avoid lung destruction or death by suffocation, we took the other path, through the open parking area. Nice, clean air. Since there were cars driving around looking for parking lots, we stuck to the pavement. It was an uneven one, with plenty of loose bricks and cracked tiles which the government somehow never replaced, but years of living here had taught us never to lose our footing. We could easily navigate the pavement with our eyes closed. Then my sister suggested an idea. Let's see who manages to walk the longest distance on the pavement edge without falling off, she said. It was one of our favorite childhood games. I had always done this just for fun as a child, way before we were taught how to use balancing beams in gym. My mom wasn't thrilled at an unstable 4-year-old being allowed to wobble on the rough cement edge of a pavement, but my grandpa encouraged it. He said it helped to hone my balance skills. Anyway, I digress. I quickly agreed, and we started. I went slow at first, putting one foot in front of the other cautiously. I certainly didn't want to trip and fall on those loose bricks. But then I turned around and saw my sister behind me, quickly catching up to me. "You suck," she taunted. "Why are you going so slow?" "Hey, this isn't a race," I argued. "It's a matter of..." She didn't let me finish. "You suck, you suck, you suck," she chanted in a sing-song voice, and started moving faster and faster towards me. Not wanting to lose out, and not wanting her to crash into me on the narrow edge, I picked up my pace. Laughing and teasing each other, we half ran about 3/4 of the length of the pavement. Then it happened, as I knew it would. In an effort not to bump into me, she had tried to halt her footsteps, but somehow failed. Then she had tried to widen her stance, but her ankle hit a loose brick that was sticking up from the ground. Arms flailing wildly, she descended not so gracefully upon the rough, merciless cement waiting for her. My first response was to gloat and tease. "Who's the sucker now?" I yelled in my excitement, doubling over with laughter. "Get up and stop being so stupid. I have a plaster in my bag, I think." She stood up slowly, and the first thing I noticed wasn't her skinned knee, nor was it a slight graze upon her elbow, but a huge patch of mashed up huat, a sort of steamed Chinese cupcake on her butt, which she immediately started brushing off. My eyes went wide. "You fell on an offering," I gasped, slightly horrified. Broken jaw sticks lay strewn all over, crushed by her weight. Cake lay mashed up into the ground, mingled with the molten wax from the candles that are so hard to remove when the offerings are over. A dismal-looking xiao tao, a kind of peach-shaped bun usually eaten during birthdays, to represent long life for the birthday person, lay hunched up in the corner where the pavement and the road met. Entirely squashed up with the filling more outside than inside. Luckily the candles had already been snuffed out by the wind, so my sister did not sustain any burn injuries. We were at a loss on what to do. On one hand, we didn't believe in ghosts, and so we weren't frightened by the prospect of possession or whatever. On the other hand, a few passers-by had already seen her fall, and we didn't want to seem disrespectful. Should we clean up the mess? Should we apologize? If so, to whom? The people, or the spirits? To the devotee who put these things out? If so, who and where was he? These questions flashed through my mind in a split second, and then, not knowing what else to do, I grabbed my sister and ran as if my life depended on it. The next day was a beautiful Saturday morning. Not your typical storybook sunny morning with azure blue skies and all that, but a comforting one, with rain beating against the windows and mild thunder every now and then. It had a comforting beauty of its own. I laid cozily in bed for a few minutes, listening to the soothing sounds of nature. Then I looked over at my sister in her own bed. I could already tell she wasn't feeling so well. Her face was extremely pale, and she was sweating despite the cooling weather we get so rarely in this hot devil's armpit of a country. She could barely sit up without the whole room spinning, and her temperature was sky high, she said. I got worried. She has the strongest immune system in this whole family, and yet... I hopped out of bed to rummage for some Panadol and water, and told her to pop a couple of pills and rest. The pills would do their job. Something didn't feel right, though. As much as I tried to convince myself that it was just an ordinary fever, that she would be well again in a couple of days at most, something deep down inside of me knew it wasn't. That something knew it had to do with the previous day's accident. But that's all rubbish, I argued with myself. It's just some food left on the pavement by some superstitious people for the crows and ants to ravage eventually. It can't be for actual spirits. They don't exist. But how do you know they don't exist? The small voice shot back. Just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they're not real. I had enough and spent the next few hours alternating between checking on my sister and drowning out the small voice at the back of my head with full volume music through my earbuds. Sunday came and went, and still the fever showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it had gotten worse. Getting worried, I asked if she was well enough to at least walk to a nearby clinic. I don't remember how, but somehow, she managed to drag herself out of bed and go down to the clinic with me. Even the doctor looked worried. He said she looked extremely dehydrated and asked if she was drinking enough water. She's been drinking plenty, I said. Goes through a 1.5-liter bottle within 2 hours. If that's not enough, I don't know what is. The doctor looked skeptical. All right, continue to stay hydrated then. Here's your prescription. We went to bed after the visit to the clinic. I desperately hoped that she would recover soon. Most of all, I hoped it was only an ordinary fever. I wouldn't want it to be anything else. I was woken up out of my sleep by a hand shaking me. Squinting up through heavy eyelids, I saw the silhouette of my sister. What do you want? I grunted, a little annoyed. It's like 3 a.m. If you want water, I left the bottle on your bedside table. It's not that, she whispered, even though there was no one else in the house to wake up. I had a bad dream. At first, my annoyance grew upon hearing the statement. So I suppose you want to come and cuddle in bed with me and hope that I can protect you, like the grown-ass woman you are. I retorted. No. It's not that. Sorry for waking you up. I just... She broke down sobbing. Slightly alarmed now, I felt a twinge of regret. Hey, what's going on? What happened? What did you dream? For a while, she sat on the edge of my bed, her body racked with terrified sobs, unable to explain what happened. I waited patiently while rubbing her back soothingly, waiting for her to come round. Finally, the sobs quieted. She shifted position to make herself more comfortable, and started recounting her ordeal. I was in a cave, she began. I was with an exploring team, checking out the caves in a mountain. We'd just stumbled upon a huge one, with many bats hanging from the ceiling. We were discussing the possibility of setting up camp inside there. All of a sudden, a couple appears at the mouth of the cave. They seem to be shouting at us, trying to tell us something, that we shouldn't go in there, and we should come out as quickly as possible. They were only a few meters away from us, and yet we couldn't hear what they were trying to say. She paused for a while, then continued. Just as suddenly as they had appeared, they disappeared. We shrugged it off and started to set up our stuff inside. I was helping a teammate pitch a tent. The teammate told me to go grab a tent pole, so I went over to the bag where they kept the equipment. I reached in, felt around, and took hold of what I thought was a tent pole. But when I pulled it out, to my horror, it had turned from a tent pole into a woman. The same woman from the couple just now. Instead of looking like a normal person as she did just now, she had become this. Here she broke down again, struggling to put into words the horror of what she had seen. She was a demon woman, my sister said eventually. I didn't want to probe further. How she could have known that the woman was a demon instead of just plain ugly, I didn't know, but I didn't want to upset her by asking. It was obviously too terrifying to recount, so I waited for her to continue. She stared at me, looked right into my soul, and at that moment I could feel her reading all my innermost thoughts, all that had ever happened to me since the day I was born. All the memories I had repressed in the recesses of my heart, she knew all of them. Just in that split second. And then what? I questioned, after half a minute of silence. I don't believe in ghosts, but I must admit that night her recounting of her dream sent chills down my spine. And then I heard a voice. She didn't open her mouth to talk or anything, but I just knew it was her voice. I heard her telling me, a warning. I don't know if it was a warning or a threat, or... I couldn't contain my curiosity. What did she say? She said, "First you show the utmost disrespect to my husband and I, you trample and mess up our sacred offerings, and then you come into my cave, my home, without my permission. Let this be the last time you do so. It's a pity for me and a good thing for you that my husband is so merciful, or I would have had you the first time." Of course I pleaded with her, trying to convince her that I had no control of what I was doing in the dream, and here she started screaming and sobbing for all she was worth. For a moment I feared she would succumb to the hyperventilating. I ran for a plastic bag, but when I dashed back into the room holding it, she was strangely calm again. A sort of weird aura surrounded her, and she was sitting up with a kind of strength she hadn't had since the fever. Her eyes looked glazed over, as if she'd just seen some sort of vision. "So, what happened next?" I asked cautiously, dropping the plastic bag and tensing every muscle in my body, ready for whatever unpredictable action my sister would do next. She opened her mouth wide, wider than any snake you've ever seen. And I caught a glimpse inside her gargantuan mouth, which seemed to swallow up all my surroundings, including myself. I saw the underworld. I saw the millions and millions of souls being tortured, and I heard their screams. Their screams, I will never forget. Unlike any other sound that you would expect to come from a human. Guttural, echoing, mingling with the screams of millions of other sinners being punished for their crimes. The last thing I heard before I woke up was her voice saying that next time, if it happens again, I will join them. "Tell me," she added, gripping my shoulders with sudden fierce intensity and staring right into my eyes. "Tell me that I will be able to erase the memories. Tell me I can forget. Tell me how, their screams, their pain." She trailed off here, her fingernails still digging into my shoulders, creating little crescent-shaped marks. Her eyes, plain and glazed over, stared right into the depths of my soul. Then without another word, she marched right back to her own bed, fell down in it, and was instantly sound asleep. I suddenly realized that my own legs were shaking so badly I could barely walk back to mine. She hasn't been awake since. She's not dead, but I can't get her to wake up. No amount of shaking, calling, blasting music or movies at full volume, or anything, can get her to wake up. She's now in the hospital under examination, but the doctor says there is absolutely nothing wrong with her. Even her temperature is normal now. The fever is gone. But she just won't wake up and I don't know what to do. I can't decide if this is a case for the doctor or an exorcist. Whatever it is, I really hope she wakes up soon. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have grabbed her and run off. I should have just apologized like people say. It's too late for that now, though. I can only watch and wait. I never believed in spirits, but just because you don't believe in them does not mean they are not there. Be very careful.
Okay, so that was Be Careful During the Hungry Ghost Festival. So that was fairly interesting. So my thought behind that was it's more towards like of like, hey, don't screw around with like the Day of the Dead and all that. I don't know. It's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's because it kind of gets you thinking, saying like when you respect the dead, is there something afterwards? We don't know. I don't know. It's just fairly interesting. Let's see. I'm scrolling through them right now. My quick vacation to the mountains. Let's do this one. My quick vacation to mountains turned into a nightmare. Okay. We'll see what this one's like. So this one seems to be a chunky and long one, so we might be here for a while on this one. So let's just make sure the whole story gets there, because I don't think... ends with the end of the screen. Yeah. So this one ends with the end of the screen. Okay, so here we go. My quick vacation to the mountains be turned into a nightmare. Here we go. Meet myself and we'll get started.
The mountains were so beautiful. I made a stop at an overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway. According to the old wooden sign, the elevation was 3,584 feet above sea level. The fall colors were so bright and overwhelming. This was the perfect weekend to be on the parkway. It was definitely the prime time for seeing the fall colors in their perfect beauty. In another couple of weeks the leaves would start falling off. Lots of folks are terrible at timing their trips to be here in the prime time, but I am evidently pretty darn good at it. I just realized how big I was smiling. I was so happy to be off for the weekend and by myself to get a much-needed break from my mundane accounting job. That big smile I was wearing just dissolved pretty quick with my remembrance of my dead-end unfulfilling job. I took one last look and hopped in my car and checked on my GPS the distance to my cabin rental for the weekend. It was just a few more miles down the road. The road was almost pitch black and it felt like I was driving through a tunnel that was on fire. I was happy that my rental would be at a high elevation. The GPS is showing 1 mile to go and the car was still climbing upward. From the directions I was given by the cabin owners, the Swansons, I would be looking for a narrow dirt road on my right. The name was simply Victoria Lane. It was a rather distinguished name for such a narrow dirt road at the top of the mountain. I turn in and make my way up the narrow, rocky, and winding road. The tree's branches were hanging down as if they were trying to grab the roof of the car and stop me from going further. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a dust cloud following me. One thing I did not see were houses, just trees and some rocks. Then the road started to get steep, very steep. It started to freak me out, to be quite honest. I was on a Mini Cooper and it took everything the poor little car had to keep going. How in the hell do people get up this road in the rain or snow? Thank God the road was starting to level out a couple of minutes later and it didn't sound like my engine was about to have a heart attack. I drove a couple minutes more and I see a 2-story log cabin on the left. This was the Swansons' home and where I would get the keys to the rental. This house was gorgeous. It looked like something that would be on the cover of a mountain scenery calendar. These folks had to be loaded. I pulled in the driveway and got out of the car. The car looked to be relieved that it was finally going to be able to rest. I jokingly pat the little car on the hood. Yep, these people were loaded. There was a newer model Range Rover in garage and a sleek Tesla parked right alongside it. I was not sure what these folks did for a living, but business was evidently very good. I was met at the door before I even knocked by a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and a very petite figure. She gave a small smile. It certainly appeared to be forced, but I didn't really care. I am not here to make friends, just here to get my cabin key. Mr. Smith, I presume? The woman said solemnly. Yes, you have a beautiful home, thank you for renting out your cabin to me, I said. The house is too large and is more trouble than it is worth, she said in a very sorrowful voice. I thought it was a rather weird statement, but I just shrugged it off. Well, I am certainly impressed with it, I said quickly. Here are your keys, the cabin is up the road. Enjoy your stay, she said and shut the door quickly. I turned around and mumbled good talk as I got back in my car. I drove down the cement driveway back onto Victoria Lane. The road curved around back of the house, which was just as immaculate as the front. There was a very impressive pool and pool house out back. The pool house would put a lot of people's real houses to shame. The road started to get steep again. I shifted the car into low and the Mini huffed and puffed for a little while longer. Then I came upon a clearing and saw the cabin on the left. This cabin was even more beautiful than the pictures online. It was basically a smaller version of the owner's home. I saw a man in the yard trimming the hedges. He looked to be middle-aged as well, so I was assuming he was Mr. Swanson. He didn't seem to notice me driving up, or either he just didn't give a damn. "Hey there. One hell of a place you have here, gorgeous," I said to the man with his back turned. He didn't respond at all. I got my suitcase and walked up the wood steps to the porch. I unlocked the door and placed my suitcase inside. I turned around to offer a second attempt at conversation with the man. I heard a motor starting and he was driving off on one of those John Deere Gators without even looking my way whatsoever. Geez, whatever happened to good old Southern hospitality? I shrugged and went back in the house and looked around. It was spotless and looked like a Pottery Barn catalog. They definitely spared no expense on the furniture and decorations. The cabin had a very pleasant woody aroma and a nice potpourri smell, but not too strong, just right. I went into the bedroom and just fell face first onto the incredibly comfortable king-sized bed. I was worn out from the long ride, and I decided I would take a short nap. I had almost drifted off to sleep when I heard a knock on the door. I was certainly startled, as I was almost asleep, and the fact that I shouldn't be having visitors. I didn't think the very sociable owners would have dropped by for tea. I got up and slowly went to the front door. There was no one there. Maybe I was in a dream state and just thought I heard a knock. I then heard a squeaking sound to my left. I went outside the front door onto the rustic wrap-around porch and began to walk left. The wood made creaking noises as I slowly walked down the porch. As I rounded the corner of the house, I saw a little girl in a tire swing attached to an enormous oak tree that had to have been a couple 100 years old. She had long brown hair and she was wearing a yellow dress. She was staring at me and giving me a big smile like she knew me well. "Hello," I said in a perplexed tone. "Hi there, my mommy and daddy own the cabin and we live just down the way," she said. "Okay, great. This cabin is terrific. What's your name?" I asked. "Victoria," she replied. "Oh cool, so your parents named the road after you?" "Can't say I have my own road," I said with a grin. "Yeah, it is pretty great, I never forget my address," she said with a giggle. The little girl appeared to be 8 or 9 years old. I didn't ask because I thought it might sound too creepy. "Do your mom and dad know you are up here?" I asked. "Yeah, I spend a lot of time outside and I love this swing. There is a path right there that goes directly to my house. You should check it out sometime. My dad even built me a tree house down that way," she said. I squinted and strained to see since the sun was shining in the way she pointed. "Yup, I think I see the path over there. Sure, I will check it out before I leave. I always wanted a tree house when I was little. I never got one though. Definitely one of the drawbacks of growing up in the city," I said. "It was nice to meet you, Victoria. I am going to head in for a nap. I am rather pooped from the long drive here." I said. "Yes sir, nice meeting you too." She waved and continued to swing as I turned to make my way back into the house. I headed back in the bedroom, still hearing the squeaking from the tire swing outside. I opened up the bedroom window to let some fresh mountain air in. I laid back down and drifted to sleep. A knock at the door jolted me awake. It was dark outside and I glanced at the red numbers on the old clock radio and it said 930. Another knock. Coming! I yelled. I slowly dragged myself out of bed and headed to the front door. I glanced through the curtain and I saw Victoria smiling at me holding a basket. "Hey Victoria, kinda late? What's up? Do your mom and dad know you are here?" I thought it was rather odd for her not to be in bed at this time of night. "Yes sir, they know, they sent me up here to give you this," she said excitedly. She handed me a wooden basket that contained a linen cloth wrapped around something. The cloth was warm and a nice aroma was coming from whatever it was wrapped around. I slowly unwrapped the mystery object. It was chocolate chip cookies. "Wow, cookies? Hot too," I said. "Yep, I helped mommy bake them myself. We always bake a batch for new guests. I am sorry we didn't get it up here sooner. Well, good night. It is my bedtime and mommy told me to hurry back." She smiled and took off really quickly. "Thank you and please thank your mom for me," I yelled as she ran away into the darkness. I went back into the cabin with my cookies and plopped down on the sofa. I flipped on the TV and started shoving a cookie in my mouth. "Damn, these are good cookies," I mumbled to myself as I ravenously devoured it. Before I knew it, I had eaten all of them in the basket. I saw that the TV had Netflix on it, so I loaded up the app and found Doctor Who and watched for a couple more hours till I dozed off again. I woke up about 6 a.m. the next morning and decided to get an early start. I planned to head to Grandfather Mountain and do a little hiking. I got dressed and headed out the door to my car. I sped off down the gravel road. I had to ride the brakes due to the steep grade. I glanced over at the owner's home and there didn't seem to be any activity. It made sense, it was an early Saturday morning. As I rounded the last turn before getting to the highway, I slammed on brakes. There was a little girl laying on the ground beside a bicycle. It was Victoria. I jumped out of the car and sprinted to the little girl. She was crying and her jeans were ripped at the knee and she was bleeding. "Victoria! Are you okay, sweetie?" I exclaimed. "Yet I think so, I just cut my knee. It is bleeding pretty bad," she said amid her pitiful sobs. She had quite a gash, blood was flowing down her leg like lava out of a volcano. "We need to put some pressure on it. Let me get something out of my car to put on it," I said. I was a volunteer firefighter in my community back home, had my EMT certification, so I knew a thing or two about first aid. As I was getting up, she stopped me. "We can just use this sweatshirt, it is old and worn out, no biggie," she said. She untied the sleeves of the white Hello Kitty sweatshirt from around her waist and handed it to me. I promptly placed it on her knee and started pressure. She let out a small cry of pain. The cut was bad enough that I thought stitches were going to be required, at least a couple. "We need to get you back to your mom," I said. I looked at her pink bike and looked back at her. "Listen, I have a bike rack on the back of the car. I am gonna put your bike on there and then we'll head up to your house. Now put your hand here and keep putting pressure to stop the bleeding," I said quickly but calmly, not to make her any more upset. I got up and picked up the little pink bike and walked to the back of my car and latched it on. Afterward, I walked back around to get Victoria and she was gone except for her bloody sweatshirt. I was shocked. I looked around frantically, yelling her name, but nothing. It was like she just vanished into thin air. It didn't take me more than a minute to get her bike attached to my car. She didn't have enough time to go anywhere without me noticing. This was insane. "Where is she?" I pulled out my cell phone and searched for the Swanson's phone number and called. There were 3 rings before I heard a woman's voice. "Hi MRS Swanson, this is the renter Terry Smith. As I was driving out today I found Victoria in the road where she had fallen off her bike. She is fine, she has a cut on her knee, but other than that she is good. She is putting pressure on it now. However, as I was attaching her bike to my car she ran off. Is she back at the house by chance?" I said out of breath. "Victoria!" she yelled. Then there was a pause, then the line went dead. "This is freaking weird," I said to myself. I decided to call out Victoria's name a few more times, but there was still no answer. I walked over to both sides of the road peering into the woods, but she wasn't anywhere. Why wasn't she answering me? She couldn't be far at all. Why would she just run off? It hit me that she may have left a blood trail, her leg was gushing pretty good. I am also willing to bet it started flowing faster when she started moving. I looked all over and nothing. I got back in the car to head back to the house and look out the window for her along the way. I threw the sweatshirt in the back seat and proceeded to do a 3-point turn in the road. As I started back up the road I heard what sounded like a siren. I stayed put for a moment and looked in my rearview mirror, and a sheriff's deputy pulls into road behind me. The deputy bolts out of the car with his weapon raised and yelled for me to get out of my car with my hands up. He was a very large muscular guy with sunglasses on his bearded face. However, all I was paying attention to was the handgun pointed straight at me. I was in complete shock, I didn't know what the hell was going on. As I was getting out, the Swanson's Range Rover was speeding towards me from the other direction. "What the heck is going on? Why are you pointing a gun at me?" I yelled. "Shut the fuck up and get on your knees and put your hands behind your head," the officer yelled. I then heard the Range Rover slam on brakes and slide on the gravel towards me. Then both doors swung open like the horse gates at the Kentucky Derby. The owners jumped out like the car was on fire. "Where is my daughter? Where is she?" the woman screamed. Her husband said nothing, he appeared to be too shocked to say anything. He just ran behind his wife. "Jesus Christ, she was just here and then she was gone," I said. "Where is the girl?" said the deputy. "I don't know. She fell off her bike and she was here." I pointed at the bike on my car to show I wasn't completely crazy about what I was saying. "Bill, oh my God, look!" She started sobbing uncontrollably when she looked at the bike. "Is that Victoria's bike, ma'am?" the deputy asked. "Yes, that is hers. This monster has her," she cried. "Have her? What the fuck are you talking about? I don't have her, I stopped to help her. That is all. She can't be far," I said. The deputy went to my car and looked all around it. He then opened the back door. He then began to talk into his radio. "Communications, I need backup now," he said quickly. "Ma'am, is this your daughter's sweatshirt?" he said to the frantic mother as he picked up the Hello Kitty sweatshirt covered in blood from Victoria's lacerated knee. Her eyes were wide and she turned completely pale and fell to her knees. Yes, that was what she was wearing when she went missing. "Oh my God, is that blood on it?" she screamed as she turned toward me. She charged at me screaming, "What have you done to my little girl? What have you done? Where is she?" The deputy pulled her off me, and she just fell to the ground sobbing. The husband fell down beside her and put his arms around her. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. "I didn't do anything to Victoria, this is ridiculous," I was sweating profusely and shaking in disbelief. I was on the verge of hyperventilating. The deputy violently handcuffed me and threw me into the back of the police car. My head slammed against the roof of the car. As more policemen arrived, they scoured the area looking for Victoria. All I could do was shake my head and stare at the floor of the car, trying to wake up from this nightmare. A police officer came and opened the door and questioned me about Victoria. I explained everything I knew: the tire swing, the cookies, the bike. They just looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. I just kept telling them over and over that I had not done anything with Victoria other than try to help her. She was somewhere in the woods, and they could just ask her when she was found. Then the officer made a statement that was burned into my brain and will never leave me as long as I live. "Sir, Victoria has been missing for 6 months," said the officer. "That's impossible. She was here. I saw her yesterday, last night, and this morning right here." "I am not crazy," I said while holding back tears and vomit. "Be that as it may, sir, but you are under arrest for the kidnapping of Victoria Swanson, and God only knows what else once you tell us where she is, and you will tell us," said the deputy. He slammed the door and got into the driver's seat. We pulled out onto the highway headed toward where I assumed police station was. I looked back to see the frantic spectacle as the officers searched for Victoria. The parents were still on the ground sobbing in each other's arms. We hadn't been 100 yards down the highway when my blood ran ice cold and my heart sunk all the way to my stomach. I saw a small figure standing in the woods between 2 pine trees as we rode by. It was her. It was Victoria, with a face of stone showing no emotion. I began to scream.
So, holy shit, that was crazy. I never, like, some of these are, like, somewhat relatable, like, start with, oh, I was just going on a vacation to do stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, the crazy girl who tricked a guy into getting arrested by the cops. Like that, all of that was a setup. It's crazy. Personally, I thought that was a really insane story. Like, some of these were, like, somewhat predictable. You could tell, like, kind of where they were leading, but that one was just so, like, oh. Because here's the thing: what a lot of kids don't realize, or what a lot of people don't realize, is that kids, they're still people. They can be very manipulative and, like, turn stuff around like that. But yeah, but that's just crazy. Let's see. Let's do this one. It's called Grandfather. This one's pretty short, so this one should go a couple of minutes. This one should go pretty fast. There you go.
Background: Hello, I'm Ryan and I'm 17 years old and I live in Southern California with my mom, dad, and 3 brothers. We're a close family, and with ourselves and non-immediate family members such as cousins and grandparents included. With this being said, we had lots of get-togethers of big and small sizes, including sleepovers with my cousins at my grandma's house and things like that. Well, my grandma's house is an older house, and from what I understand had always been in the family. I've been told there was at one point 3 actual houses on the relatively small property and all raised family members. Well, as I said, we had many family meetings at this house. Direct. I'm sure you can imagine a lot of things happening in this house, creating some of the best memories and some of the worst. Well, one night back in the winter of 2006, my older cousin, my brother, and myself were all sleeping at my grandmother's house. This wasn't too long after the passing of my grandfather, and my grandmother still wasn't quite ready to move any of his belongings. Which I'm sure you can understand, as they had been married since she was 16. All his clothes still in the drawers, chair still in the corner of the bedroom, and even all his medication still on top of his dresser. Now, like I said, it was later in the year and quite cold outside, and if I remember correctly it was also raining. My cousin and brother, being the dicks they were, used this to their advantage and tried to scare me. I remember being so naive and just eating up the "I think someone's outside" bit. I was absolutely scared, but it's not like I was going to go outside myself and check. Hiding under the blankets, every flash of lightning made me shake just a little more. It got to the point of my cousin saying she thinks that this person somehow got inside through the back door, and of course I believed every bit of it. I couldn't have gotten up faster and ran into my grandma's bedroom. I hid under the heavy sheets and kinda just peeked over the blanket, terrified. Well, my cousin and brother come walking in, getting ready to probably tell me more shit or laugh at me for being so scared. Well, before they can get all the way in the room, all of my grandfather's remaining medicine was thrown off his dresser. This couldn't have scared my brother and cousin more. For whatever reason, I was not. I felt at peace, almost as if it was supposed to happen. Of course, my grandma was quite mad when she saw it and almost broke down when she had to pick it all up. To this day I still believe it was my grandpa protecting me from my cousin and brother scaring me. Thanks for taking the time to read. I have some more stories, so LMK if you'd like to hear. And of course, sorry for any cringe grammar and spelling mistakes.
So that's interesting. So those are kind of like little ghost sightings you see everywhere, where it's kind of like, oh, like it was kind of like someone responding to a ghost. But yeah, I actually just ran into this other story. This is also another short one. It's "I Am a Ghost," which kind of sounds interesting, so I kind of want to do this one next. Again, if you guys like this type of content, because I love this type of stuff, personally I might do it again some other time, but if you want more of this, let me know. I'll be sure to hop into it. Here we go.
It's that time of year again. Another stupid Halloween night with a bunch of stupid kids breaking into my house, just to prove they have balls to enter a haunted house. Well, I'm a ghost, or at least that's what they call me. I'm not entirely sure what am I. I just float around this empty house when no one is around. To keep me sane, I also write this diary of mine. It takes a lot of effort for me to manifest myself in order to touch physical things, but it's totally worth it. It might sound mundane to you, but I actually enjoy my time here. It's very peaceful. Until a bunch of stupid kids decided to show up every dang Halloween. Each year bringing one or two new faces. This year was no exception. The first one to enter was a familiar face. A chubby kid, short curly hair, cheeks splattered with chocolate freckles and flanked by two big round ears. A loud creak echoed through the empty halls as he took the first step onto the old wooden floor. His breathing was shallow and rapid. Awkwardly puffing his chest, in a sad attempt to appear nonchalant. The faint beam of his Garrity Mini rugged light failed to cut through the thick darkness that is waiting to engulf him and his friends into nothingness. "Ah, come on guys, stop being a wuss," Chubby taunted his friends. "Are you sure this is a good idea? Let's just go and grab more candies. I don't like it here," a short but wiser kid replied. "Look, Kenny. We do this every fucking year. Don't you wanna get laid? The girls in school would totally think we're badasses. Besides, I have my eyes on Debbie Reynolds and I'll be damned if she isn't the slightest impress." Chubby gaining more confidence. "God damn it, Billy. You're 12. Do you even know the meaning of getting laid?" said a tall scrawny kid. Yes," Chubby replied unassertively. Let's just get this over with so we can all go home and stuff our face full of chewy giant sweet tarts, a kid with huge spectacles sighed. The rest hesitantly agreed and stepped in. One of them murmured something, I think it was a prayer or somewhat. The thumping of their hearts grew louder as they ventured deeper into the dark halls. I started with their flashlight, lightly touching it so that it flickers. Oh shit, I forgot to change my batteries, Chubby laughed nervously. His friends flipped him the birdie at the same time and shook their heads in unison. That made me chuckled a little. Fuck. Did you hear that? The tall kid whispered. Hear what? Stop messing around, said the short kid. Ha ha pussy. Chubby mocking the tall kid. I swear one more word from your big fat mouth. I interrupted the tall kid with a light whisper, get out. His face turned pale. GHGH go, he choked on his saliva, decided not to finish his sentence and ran all the way out of the house. What's his problem? Scoffed the kid with the large spectacle. What a wuss. Common, we'll just go upstairs and then we're done. Oh Debbie, here comes Billy the Willy. Dang it. I thought to myself. It looks like the other three kids couldn't hear me. I was low on energy. It takes a considerable amount of effort even for a whisper or a chuckle to be heard. Frustrated, I let out an ear-piercing scream. Well, at least it was ear-piercing to me. Those three kids barely even noticed it. They just stopped on their tracks, listened for a minute or so and went on. I understand that some people are sensitive to a certain frequency and some people are not. Which explains why the tall kid was the only one able to hear me. The others were completely oblivious. But I wasn't about to give up. With all my might, I forcefully will myself into a terrifying physical form. The usual horror cliché I heard from kids. Long dark hair, dark red liquid oozing out of my empty eye sockets, exposed muscle tissue and bits of broken bones sticking out of my body. I have to admit, if I were to look in the mirror now, I would have shat my pants. It's horrifying. As they were heading up the stairs, I appeared in front of them and with my last bit of energy, I shrieked. It caught them by surprise. They screamed like little girls and ran out into the night. I let out a sigh of relief. I hope I scare the crap out of them and they won't come back. I was exhausted, but I was also desperate. They say there is nothing to fear but fear itself, yet in our world that isn't true. Many things are worse than fear. And one of the things is in this house. Locked in the upstairs room. Waiting to be set free. But I'm getting weaker year after year. Soon, I won't be able to scare the kids out of this house anymore. Soon, they will make it upstairs. Soon, they will unlock the door.
Okay, so that was actually really interesting, like from a storytelling point. So it shows a ghost actually trying to be protective and scare them away from the horror. That's actually really good storytelling. Honestly, whoever wrote that, Mr. CB Melody, I highly recommend, or not CB Melody, ignore what I just said, Stranger Wise or whatever your name is, whoever reposts on that. It's a really good story. I highly recommend continue elaborating onto that. People would want to read that because it's like it has mystery to it. It shows like another side to like a horror aspect that we don't normally look at. So yeah, I honestly would highly recommend continuing that. We do Hidden in Plain Sight. It's kind of cool. Wait, what does it say? Disclaimer. For details to this is first post. I will believe this is true story. Lack of details is any information about certain persons or group of persons. Now onto the story. Is there stuff I can't? For the lack of that, I was gonna do hidden in plain sight. If you guys want to go check it out, you can. But I don't want to put it out if there's stuff that's not supposed to go in there or supposed to be public. I'm not gonna do. Just do always listen to your dentist. Why not? Oh, this one looks like it has dates, so that means it's slowly being updated. So if you hear like dates on this one, that means like either it's been happening currently or they're just constantly updating it. But here we go. So this one again is called Listen to Your Dentist. Okay.
My mom used to take me to the dentist when I was a kid, and I never thought much of it, because no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried to get him to take me and my oral care seriously, he'd always poke and prod at my gums until they bled and acted like that was proof that I didn't care about my mouth. You get called a failure enough time by enough people you're trying to impress, and Jesus God above, I don't know if you can get out of that self-fulfilling prophecy. The times I would go and he would mishandle my teeth, telling me I didn't do enough brushing or flossing, were the same times I'd pay extra good care to do just that. And the times he'd tell me I was a mouth exemplar to the masses were the times I snuck a toothbrush into school and just brushed every 15 minutes in class. I thought, maybe Dr. Neville doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, and maybe he's not right about this whole mouth health thing. Not a great rationalization. But since there were no rhyme or reason to the way I'd be praised, I settled on what seemed, at the time, logical. If he won't appreciate me for what I'm doing right, then he sure as shit shouldn't appreciate me when I'm doing wrong. No, I haven't been able to keep a boyfriend or girlfriend for more than a year. Why do you ask? I turned 18, moved out of my folks' house, and didn't see a dentist again for a decade. I had more important things to take care of. Buying a car, drinking whiskey, smoking cigarettes, singing in bars, showing up to work reeking of smoke with the night still on me for my call center job. I was generally well liked around the office, but some of the older women took a shine to me in a way that I can only describe as maternal. I looked very much like I couldn't take care of myself, but it was all part of a clever ruse. See, the reason I looked like that was because I couldn't much take care of myself. I became a drone for my vices, a Jaeger where the pilots were my need for tobacco and booze. I had a wake-up call one today, something that told me I needed to stop drifting too much, that I needed to take control, and that was when one of my teeth fell out. I made a bag of popcorn at work, and got a kernel stuck between some of my back chompers, and I couldn't quite get it loose. I tried to work it out with my tongue to no avail, so I carried on about my day despite my passive discomfort. When I went outside for a cigarette, I finally maneuvered the piece out, and tried to chomp down on it, except it was brittle, like a rock. I spit it out, into my hand. Half a tooth. Okay, I thought, that's not great. And I threw it. Why? Because I had just spit a part of my face into my hand and I was freaking the fuck out. My food bones were broken and I had fucked up. I calmly walked to my manager's office, explained what had happened, and was told in no uncertain terms that I was not to leave for the day or else I would be forced to start my vacation early, and, not come back to my job. Also, the vacation wouldn't be paid. I told Laura, one of the coven of the concerned mothers on the floor, and asked her what I should do. She told me to schedule an appointment with a dentist immediately and put in for a sick day. I said I didn't know a dentist. She picked up her cell phone, tossed it to me, and told me it was speed dial 7. You have your dentist on speed dial? I have all emergency services on speed dial. 8 is urgent care. 6 is my physician. 1 is voicemail. 2 is Emma. 3 is Larry, and she continued to name other people who were plugged into Laura's infallible speed dial network. I went to press and hold 7, but my finger froze over the button. Fucking dentists. What do they know? Can't do it, I said to Laura. Why not? Fucking dentists. What do they know? Well, Grant, for one, they probably know what to do since your tooth fucking fell out, she smiled. Can't do it. So Laura made my appointment for me, set for 5 days later. And I scheduled off. I plan on keeping the appointment, because the pain is just getting worse by the fucking second. August 22, 2018. What's left in there is more hole than tooth, Dr. Evans said after taking a 3-second look at the X-ray. Aren't you in horrible pain? I nodded, in horrible pain. Over the past 48 hours my face had become fire, my jaw had locked up, and no matter how many ibuprofen I took, the razor's ache in my gum line wouldn't go away. When I woke up in the morning for my appointment, to top right of my face had swollen and I could taste something sour, like puss, every time I swallowed. Looks like your gum has overgrown where your tooth broke, Dr. Evans continued. But there was a sharper edge in there on the break line, which is causing some serration every time you make a slight movement. What qualifies as a slight movement? He paused, and pulled a glove off. Well, in this case, talking. Or breathing. I've seen gum heal over a broken tooth, but the break was dull. You have a wound that keeps reopening, which has gotten pretty infected. I'm starting you on a course of antibiotics, and a referral to Dr. Glum, a pal of mine. He's in network, an oral surgeon, but I'll give him a call and he'll write out a script for a prescription rinse. After you finish the antibiotics, schedule a follow-up with either me or Glum. He can get the rest of the tooth out but can't fit you for a denture. I can fit you for a denture but I can't get the tooth out. August 23, 2018. Dr. Glum's nurse greeted me later that afternoon as I walked into his office, an ice pack pressed against the side of my face, 1 dose of antibiotic gurgling around in my stomach. The instructions said to take with food, but I couldn't eat, so fuck the instructions. She walked me back to an exam room, and I sat down, expecting her to hand me another prescription. Instead, she asked me to wait there while she got Glum. Glum was an odd-shaped orange ball of a squat man, with a tiny hooked nose and a smile that showed off all his impressive dental work. His voice was a little higher than I expected, and he nervously tugged at the crotch of his slacks as he sat down opposite me. Evans said you have a bad break of your mouth? I nodded. Mrack, real thwackin' batch. And tongue swelling, too. Mrack. He nodded. Well, how are the rest of your ivory boys doing? Still manning the shore of the Gum Sea? I sighed heavily. Right, my charm isn't for everyone, he chuckled nervously. Due to the severity of the situation, as Evans said, I called around to a few pharmacies to see if they had any of our regular antifungal rinse in. And they don't. At least, not for 50 miles around, he said solemnly. I grimaced. Not to fear, he said. I have some older samples from when the rinse was undergoing FDA testing. They're a bit old, but the bottles are sealed and the ingredient list doesn't have anything that would cause, singularly or in concert with other items, any sort of degradation. Are you interested? Will it help the pain? Yes. Thane yes. August 25, 2018. Glum had given me a small 100 ml bottle, a few pillowcases, and a doctor's note to get me out of work for the next few days. I returned home, turned off the lights, took 8 ibuprofen, an antibiotic, swished with the prescription rinse, put a cold towel over my eyes, a refrigerated sleep mask over the towel, and tried to sleep. I looked over at the bag that Glum had put the prescription instructions and medicine in. Inside were 3 specialty pillowcases. Ultra absorbent, as the rinse was going to get my mouth started like an out-of-control car wash. But I couldn't get up. I had just gotten cozy. He did seem to say they were pretty. I managed, before passing the fuck out. I woke up in a sopping pool of my own drool, on my regular pillowcase. I tried to flip the pillow over, but it had been soaked completely through and was 10 pounds heavier than I expected. I shuddered, tossed it onto the ground where it splattered and slid, and pulled a pillow from the other side of my bed before falling back asleep. My face hurt less when I woke up, but my new pillow was also fucking soaked through and I had a pretty massive headache, most likely from dehydration. Considering I was seemingly sweating through my tooth hole enough to fill a goddamn goldfish tank. August 26, 2018. I can hear him. I can hear him, so I gotta be quick. Oh fuck, I have to rush this. I stood, and stumbled over to my bathroom, opening the door and gripping the sink. My mouth was still filling with spit. Glum hadn't mentioned this bit. I spit. Again. And again. And again. Until I had a clear enough mouth to down some actual water instead of the slime my body was producing. It immediately caused the roar in my skull down to a slight hum, and I spit again and again and again. I ran the tap hot and splashed some water over my face, before walking to the kitchen to grab a piece of bread. I was very hungry, and figured the bread might be edible even with the amount of drool I was slinging. I chomped it down, but had to spit it out. It wasn't sponging up shit. It just sat and mired around while my mouth filled up again. When I discarded the bread into the sink, I could see my spit was tinged orange and white, but the bread was dry. It hadn't absorbed anything. Even though it sat atop a slick stain of viscous fluid, it crumbed to the touch. I heard my sink in the bathroom flow over. I hadn't stopped running the water, but I hadn't put the stopper in, either. I rushed back, passing my open bedroom door, and the pillow I had discarded caught my eye. The pillowcase had been blue. I was sure of it, I was so sure of it, but from this distance, it looked off-white. I turned the water off in the bathroom, tossing a towel down onto the ground without looking to soak up some water, and stepped into my room, kneeling down next to my pillow. Running my hand over the changed fabric. It hadn't turned off-white. My fingers moved over the pillow, and I could feel something wrong. The pillow wasn't covered in fabric anymore. It wasn't the white pattern I had noticed was bumpy, and as my hand slid across the surface, there was a light scraping sound as the pattern was interrupted and shifted back into place. Teeth. Teeth were growing out of the pillowcase. I looked up at my bed, at my replacement pillow, the case no longer red but off-white. Slowly, the pattern spread, until it covered every single darkened spot I had drooled over. I gagged immediately, returning to the bathroom. The sink hadn't managed to drain at all, and I almost fell, slipping on the slickness of the floor. But I caught myself on the counter and looked down the drain. I hadn't put the stopper in, I hadn't. It was little calcified bumps, growing from the mouth of the pipe. I shouldn't have looked in the mirror. Oh God, I shouldn't have. Where my face had been resting on the pillowcase, where my face had been resting in the pile of drool, where my cheeks had once been rosy with blush, small white pebbles were forming. On my cheek, down to my chin, to my forehead, round and growing. I could see them. I could see them and I can hear them. I can hear them as they're growing, I can hear them as they burrow down, scraping my jaw, rubbing against each other. I can hear them as they sharpen and age, and I tried to pull one out. I did, but it hurt so much. It hurt so much when I tried to pull the one growing closest to my eye. But the roots had grown deep, and when I pulled on it I could feel my eye start to pull too, and now that eye is dead, and small formation of teeth growing out of it, and it hurts to blink. Jesus, it hurts to blink, but I thought I'd have more time to write this, to get this out, to apologize. But they're growing so fast now, they're growing so fucking fast I can't stop them. I can hear them in the drain, squeaking like styrofoam as they jockey for position, so they can expand. I can hear them growing in my room, and I swear to Christ they're getting to be 6 inches long now, and I need to tell you more, I need to tell everyone more, but oh god damn it, godamnit. It's all over my chest. I haven't been able to stop drooling, and I can feel them. I can hear them grow.
So I didn't actually know where the stopping point was, I didn't look for it, but Jesus Christ, that's brutal. That's, again, that's something I never heard before, but oh my god. I really have nothing else to say about that. It's crazy. Like, the fact that, like experimental medicine, doctors don't usually do that, but the fact of the matter is that happened, like, it wasn't not based on a true story, it's obviously fake, but the fact that that can happen is insane and really weird that, you know, that story was told like that. I don't know. I'm kind of like extremely tired, guys, if you couldn't hear it in my voice. I haven't really protruded out of my voice, it's just that my wording is a bit off. So that's why I'm not trying to talk as much today. I just wanted to, you know, listen to these stories and just relax, chill. But yeah. Let's do a cursed word. This one's a bit chunkier, looks like. So this one might actually go for a little while. Here we go. Copy. Me. Do that. But a lot of this stuff is happening, guys. Like with the whole serial killer was a friend or a dentist thing. Always listen to your dentist. Don't, like, this stuff doesn't really happen, but always listen to your dentist. And then for those who have a serial killer as a friend, Do not keep their identity hidden. Please. Thank you. It's not right. They can
Why
find
is a
help.
swear word known as a cursed word? Oh God, what did I do? What have I done? I'm sorry, I've calmed down a little, but now I'm gonna have to tell you what my sin was before he gets me. Hi, my name is unknown. I'm calling myself that as I don't want anyone to know who I am. I'm 24, from the center of London. All names and places have been changed as a safety precaution. So a few days ago I was heading out with the family to a nature preserve somewhere up north. There was myself, my little sister and my mum and dad. Unfortunately, as of me typing this, my mum is dead, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to take you guys to the hotel of which we stayed. As soon as you walked in, the room gave me a really creepy vibe, like some poor soul killed himself or herself. In the room on the left was a single double bed with 2 cots on either side and an old dusty TV on the opposite end of the wall. As we walked in, my dad somehow managed to hurt himself. I don't know how, but my dad could swear for England. Every word out of his mouth is F that you're AC, and you can gather the rest. My dad is like Gordon Ramsay on crack. My dad then sat on the bed rubbing his foot where it hurt and without hesitation swore again. Why is it often viewed as normal when adults swear or use profanity, but when young people do it, it's considered shocking? Does a person's age determine whether it's okay to curse? Since so many people use foul language and there seems to be a double standard when it comes to age, you might well ask, what's so bad about swearing? Well, that's where we get to the weird part. That's why I'm writing it here and not on Facebook or anything else. I'm writing it here so someone will believe me. Okay, I'm sorry the story is all scattered, but can you blame me? Well, yet at this point you can, as I've said. Jack shhhh, God, I gotta calm down, this is freaking me out. Okay, so my dad sat down on the bed and swore. After the initial word was said, the atmosphere in the room changed drastically. Instead of the one cold room that we was meant to be staying in, it was now hot and only getting hotter. What the bloody hell is going on? Did you do something, boy? Said my dad in a chalky voice. The heat was getting to him so much he was unable to speak properly. No, I didn't do anything, I said through tears as flames sparked up all around me. He's right, he didn't do anything. I did, said a strange young man. As soon as the man appeared, the flames dispersed. My mum and sister were bundled up in the corner, my mother still holding on for dear life, as my sister screams bloody murder. Then we see it, the man for now totally forgotten. My mother was dead. The fire, the heat had killed her. It was too hot. The flames hit her body so violently that parts of her skin was peeling of ever so slightly, and as blood trickled down her face like crimson tears, the man spoke up. What a waste of human life, said the man in a solemn voice. What the FK did you do? Said my dad, only getting even more angry as the reality struck that my mother was now dead. Me, said the man. I didn't do anything. This was all you, the man said with a smile creeping across his mouth. What the FK do you mean? Scratch that, who the FK are you? Said my dad, gaining a bit of composure. AAA, I see, you want to get straight to the point. Well, I'm everyone and everyone is a part of me, said the man, now inching his way to me. Stop right there, mate. If you think you can touch my son, you've got another thing coming, said my dad, now rushing to my side to protect me. The man laughed at this. You blame the boy and then protect him? Humans are so unpredictable. So have you figured out who I am yet? Said the man, now getting very impatient. You're the devil, right? After all, you came out of flames, said my dad, hesitating his answer as the words hit the air. He giggled at how crazy it was. You so close? No, I'm not the devil, I'm God, and the devil. I'm the good and just, but I'm also the Prince of Darkness and the King of Mischief, said the godlike creature now in our presence. Do you know why I'm here, David? Said the man. My dad just stared, shocked at what he just said. I assume you do, so I can finish my task here quick and you can all get along with your pointless, pathetic lives. I'm tell you this, David. Do you know why a swear word is also known as a cursed word? No. Well, let me tell you. Yes, I do, said my dad, cutting of the man mid-sentence. When words fail us, we curse. At least this is what the poverty of vocabulary POV hypothesis would have us believe. On this account, swearing is the sign of a weak vocabulary, a result of a lack of education, laziness, or impulsiveness. In line with this idea, we tend to judge vulgarians quite harshly, rating them as lower on socio-intellectual status, less effective at their jobs and less friendly. But this view of the crass does not square with recent research in linguistics. For example, the POV hypothesis would predict that when people struggle to come up with the right words, they are more likely to spew swears left and right. But research shows that people tend to fill the awkward gaps in their language with ers and ums, not shts and god mni. This research has led to a competing explanation for swearing. Fluency with taboo words might be a sign of general verbal fluency. Those who are exceptionally vulgar might also be exceptionally eloquent and intelligent. Indeed, taboo words hold a particular purpose in our lexicon that other words cannot as effectively accomplish to deliver intense, succinct, and directed emotional expression. So, those who swear frequently might just be more sophisticated in the linguistic resources they can draw from in order to make their point. My dad said with a smile. Ha 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 ha, well you got me there, said the man. But no, a swear word is a cursed word, as I invented them as a way to contact myself. Consider it an invitation for me to help myself. Help yourself to what? My dad said, backing up ever so slightly. To your soul, of course. I didn't come here for small talk, I just wanted your soul. You swear too much for my liking, and you're really starting to get on my nerves, as all I hear from you in F8K that you're a TW and so forth, it's unbearable. So now I've come for you, don't worry, your boy is fine and the girl in the corner, the man said in a more demanding tone. My sister, oh my god, my sister. Since this man was in our room I've forgotten about everything, even my sister being cuddled by my dead mother. Oh god, I wish I could go back, I said with clear desperation in my voice. Well okay, but this is your only one, do you wish to use it now? The man said, now with his arms crossed and looking right at me. Yet, I said, confused. Well okay, but you'll be the only one to remember what happened, as this is your wish, God said now with a kind smile to his face. And poof, just like that I woke up in my bed sweating like mad, thinking that it was all just a bad dream, until I spotted a note on my desk this morning. It said just 5 small words. Cursed words will kill you.
Okay, so that's also pretty interesting. I never heard that curse words like saying fucking shit and all that will actually get you murdered. That's interesting. I don't get what's the plot of the story, but again, pretty fucking, good way of like teaching people to try and use curse words, because honestly, in my opinion, curse words just are pushed into such a negative light that it's something you don't want to do. Like, you shouldn't be, every word, you kind of sound stupid when you use every single word as a curse word. It shows that you have a lack of vocabulary, in my opinion, but I guess technically to their studies or whatever, it means something to them. Anyway, this next one we're going to do is called The Girl. That's pretty much it. Here we go.
You'll never know what it's like until you see what I've seen. You'll never understand what it's like until you've felt what I've felt. The darkness of insanity creeping into your lungs. Nobody ever understood this. Not until that day. The day I met her. She was dressed in all black. Black jeans, black hoodie, black sneakers. Everything black. I was curious back then, I always had been. Let's just say that my curiosity got the best of me. I was unsure of how to approach her. She had been there for days. Staring, smiling, everything except her lips hidden. I felt this need to know her. To hear the words from her lips. I should have known she would be nothing but a temptress. The day I finally found the courage to meet her was the day my world fell apart. I walked up to her with an unsure look on my face. I'm just being nice, I kept telling myself. That was a lie. Hello. I saw you're always alone and just wanted to say hi. This was my first mistake. No, that's not true. My first mistake was even glancing at her. How nice of you, she replied with a smirk. That creeped me out even more. A few moments later I found myself in the situation of her asking me to walk with her. I agreed. Mistake. You're such a nice girl, the temptress said. That was when the first moment of darkness crept in. Nice? I am not nice. I am pure weight. Why was I thinking this? I blinked a few times and smiled. Thank you, I said quickly. I was trying to hide the writhing shadows beneath my skin. Trying to conceal it. Don't hide it. Don't cage it, she said. What are you talking about? How could she know this? I know what you're feeling. I understand. I helped place it there, she sat on a gravestone. I had been so caught up in my thoughts I hadn't noticed where we were going. You did this to me? Why? My thoughts were jumbled enough that I couldn't see. She now looked sad. Being the only one so twisted and insane in this town is lonely. I want a feeling of belonging. I've seen others. I've seen you. How you look at me each day with curiosity. Suddenly the girl appeared in front of me with a desperate look on her face. You already harbored some of the darkness. You're perfect. We can be friends. Friends forever. The desperation became something more. She was frantic, insane. A horrible beauty. And no. You're evil. You need help. I backed away from the mad woman. She was absolutely insane. No. Please don't leave me. The girl curled into a ball on the ground. In despair or insanity, I couldn't tell. You need help. This isn't good. I wondered about the closest phone or house. But she stuttered slowly as if in a state of shattered confusion. Could it all be that bad? She whispered.
Let me finish up this one here. I didn't get that story as much. It could be something I'm missing. Or probably a continuation of something I could have missed. But yeah, that one was a bit confusing for me. I didn't know what that was about. With that, how that story was supposed to go. But yeah, so I'm gonna click off of this. We'll move on to this octopus in a sec. I'm gonna, what's it called? Let's kick up the next story. If you guys understood that one, please go into explanation, like what's the deeper meaning behind that story, because I did not understand it for the like of me. Let's do... Ooh, it's a series. Let's do White Door, because it's part 1. We'll see. I don't know if there's a part 2, but we'll see. See what this is about. I'm also enjoying this game because it's just relaxing. This is one of those games, the coloring pixel, where you can just sit and relax, you know, and not have to worry about just content creating. Because for those who don't know, when it comes to making those videos and playing those games, don't get me wrong, I love playing video games. It's just so much like emotion you get to spew out when streaming those games for so long. But yeah, anyway, here we go. White Doors part 1.
I've never really had a reason to live. Every day is just the same. Eat, sleep, walk around, maybe a different activity here or there. Absolute monotony. I'm 27 and I still have no idea what to do with my life. I work at a Ben Jerry's. I hate it there. I hate the brand, I hate my co-workers, I hate my manager, I hate the ambience, I even hate the ice cream. Why do I do it? Why not just sit at home watch Netflix all day? I don't care. I'll quit my job. I'll go homeless. I'll die. I don't have any more joy in me. It wasn't always like this. There was a time where I had meaning in my life. I had someone special who made it brighter, my sister Sally. We had such great times together. I would pick her up every day from school, we would then get ice cream, obviously not Ben Jerry's, go to the park, talk about cartoons. I loved her more than anyone else in my family did. Too bad life sucks so that the one thing I cared about was taken away from me. She went missing 9 years ago. She was at home just like any other day, but apparently she was left alone watching TV in the living room and suddenly disappeared. My mom was in the house, she had no idea how she slipped away. We were devastated. It was the beginning of my downward spiral. The police couldn't help, neither did the neighborhood. She was gone. Declared dead. That was around the time when my grades started to decline, constantly started arguing with my mom, drank a lot, weed, you know the drill. My parents eventually decided to cut me off and I was on my own in a shitty apartment. I still live there. Right next to an old, busted up laundromat that I'm pretty sure also sells drugs. The smell. God, I'm sick of it. I need to leave this place. I've been saving up for the past 5 months to move into this half-decent condo halfway across town. Maybe things will go up from there, who knows. I'm finally going to move in my new place. Finished packing and about to leave. Fuck this place. I'm so glad I'm leaving it behind. Good riddance. I'm actually moving in with my buddy, Kyle. He's pretty much the reason why I found out about this condo in the first place. We're planning on opening up a clothing brand. That condo is going to be our base of operations, so to speak. If things go to plan, maybe I'll finally quit serving mediocre ice cream to people I despise. So this place isn't that bad. It's pretty standard. Nothing out of the ordinary. Sucks that we have to go up 4 flights of stairs to get to our apartment. Even my old trashy place had an elevator. So I'm on my way to our apartment. Kyle and I are right behind our landlord who's taking us there, and I notice something very peculiar. We're at a long hallway with rows of doors on either side. All of them are gray on white walls, except for one. That door was white. It seemed so oddly out of place that I just had to ask about it. Hey, so why is that door white? I asked the landlord. Oh, I don't really remember, I think one of the previous tenants wanted it repainted that way. It was a long time ago, kid. Forget about it. I shrug it off and we keep moving until we eventually make it to our place. Wow, there's actually enough space for the 2 of us, mentions Kyle. Yeah, it's better than I expected, I reply. You think we can get the site up and running this week? I've got a hot stack of shirts right in this box over here. Ready to go, says Kyle, enthusiastically. No, let's just relax for a couple of days. No need to rush. Don't even feel like unpacking. Stop fucking around, man. You know we gotta do this thing fast. It needs to blow up. You know Stilter's up my ass. Still haven't paid him off, hey? Boo-hoo, not my goddamn problem. Fuck you, dude. You know fuck it. I'm unpacking, you better hay off your ass and help me out here. Sure, maybe when you stop saying you know. The next day, I wake up feeling like shit. My back hurts, didn't set up a bed frame yet, barely slept. Still have 3 hours before my shift starts, so I leave to get some breakfast. I hop on my bike and make my way to Bernie's, this one deli I like. He makes the best turkey sandwiches. I don't know how it happened. 1 minute I was riding my bike normally, but before I knew it, I was on the floor facing the ground with a massive pain on my nose and face. I then slipped into unconsciousness and woke up in an emergency room. Thank God you're awake. Are you okay? Said a voice right next to me. I knew who that was. It's my mom, with her raspy, chain smoker delivery. Yeah, I'm fine. What happened? I asked. Apparently you slipped. Thank God people were nearby, else you wouldn't be here in time. My mom looked genuinely worried. That's the thing with moms, doesn't matter how much of a worthless piece of shit you are. Moms will still find an excuse to be worried about you. That man. I tell her as I recall catching a glimpse of a guy who might have been responsible. Yeah, I remember, some dude tripped me, Mom. Really? From what I've heard, you tripped by yourself. Nobody was even close to you. She replied. No. That doesn't sound right. I distinctly remember seeing a man who tripped me moments before the accident happened. Didn't see his face, but still. Someone did this to me, Mom. She looks confused, yet much more worried. Oh God, were you hallucinating? Were you high? Oh God, oh God. Please, son. You need to stop doing this to yourself. We know, Mom. I wasn't high. I've been off drugs for months. I told you that. There was someone there. I know it. My mom kept quiet after that, still seemingly unfazed and unconvinced. What was that? Did I imagine that guy? 3 days later, I've recovered and ready to go home. Waiting at the hospital entrance for Kyle to come pick me up. Stay close. I hear someone pretty much whisper into my soul. I start to look around wildly for who the hell said this to me. There was noon that close. What was that? Who was that? Am I crazy? Right before I give it a second thought, Kyle shows up. I hop in his car and we drive back home. Shit man, that was unlucky. Hope you're doing all right, says Kyle. Yeah. I'm all right. Injuries, you know how it is. Are you doing that on purpose? What? No. What are you in the middle of that sentence? I hear the voice again. Stay close to. It sounded like a demon straight from a horror movie. What the fuck? Who was that? I take a look behind me with sweat dripping down my forehead. Whoa, relax, man. What wrong? I didn't care about his concern. I'm going crazy. I'm hearing voices. I'm seeing things. Why is this happening? Where did it begin? Oh boy. Really not looking forward to going to bed tonight. This is gonna haunt me for weeks. That voice. It shook me at my very core. It was like someone from my past who I murdered or wronged in a way, and their ghost wanted to seek revenge by getting into my head. Is it related to that man I saw? What's gonna happen to me? I'm so scared. I need help. I need help. But I don't know from where.
Okay, so I don't know about that one either. That one actually kind of sounded like a plea for help, like as in someone was in trouble. Obviously, I don't know if that was written into it to make it sound like that or that was purposely, but that was pretty weird. Personally, if you're having those types of problems, that's to me a mental problem. I would have that looked at right away. Oh wait, this is part 2 of a story, so hold up. Let me see if they have part 1. Hold up, so it's part 1. No, so they haven't released part 2 yet. So we'll get it with it. If we ever get to do this again and I find part 2, I'll let you guys know. Here we go. This one is called where's the title? This one is called, hold up. The Cave. This is a pretty big one as well. There we go.
My family and I recently moved into a slightly larger house in a beautiful, rural area of Maine. The town consists of maybe 40 people. The house is nothing awe-inspiring, but the price was incredible, and the view followed suit. It sat on a couple acres. The backyard showed dense, green forests and the front led to a quiet, country road with hardly any drivers. For my family of 3, it was perfect. The closest house next to us was a few miles down the road and the woods provided a perfect, natural barrier in between us. At night, all we could hear were the singing crickets and the wind brushing its way softly through the trees. Coming from a bustling city, it was unbelievably serene. We spent the first week getting settled in. We explored the surrounding areas and visited the local town to get acquainted with some of our new shops and locals. Everyone seemed so upbeat and excited to meet us. We don't get too many out-of-towners around these parts. What brings you to our town? One of the shopkeepers asked. I grinned, mainly work, but this crisp, mountain air is a little addicting. May have some permanent residence on your hands. He cut his eyes at me as he slowly shook his head and scoffed. I doubt that. I was a little taken aback. I grabbed my bags and headed back to the car. I could feel his gaze peer into me as I left. Guess every town has to have at least one asshole, right? I chuckled to myself as I loaded my car and headed back to the house. Night came quickly as the air cooled and the sun faded into the trees. I put my daughter Aurora to bed, grabbed a glass of Merlot, and joined my wife on the swing on our front porch. We sat in silence, enjoying the still night and fresh air. I put my arm around my wife and pulled her closer. I could get used to this, I said as I lifted the wine glass to my face. She just looked at me and smiled. Then, almost like someone flipped a switch, the breeze halted. Do you smell that? I asked, confused. It almost smells like something's burning. Are you cooking? I don't smell anything, my wife chimed in, shaking her head. I got up and ran inside. Everything was still. The stove was off, and the oven was cold, yet the smell remained. It was insufferable. I opened some windows to get some airflow coursing through the house. I couldn't handle it. After checking all the gas outlets and appliances, I chugged another glass of wine and hurried to bed. I woke up at 3 in a panicked state. My heart raced and sweat trickled down my face. I reached for a water bottle, but my hands were trembling. I sat up to catch my breath. I had no recollection of having a nightmare or any dream at all for that matter. I was clueless as to why I was panicking. My wife laid motionless beside me, with the occasional grunt and drawn-out snore. I rubbed my eyes and focused on my breathing. That's when a light beamed through our window. It was the motion sensor light. The woods were close, so animals aren't a rare occurrence. I got up and peered through the window. It was dark, only the circle where the light illuminated the ground was visible. As my eyes swept across the area, they were met by something small. I squinted in hopes to make out what it was. Feet? From a person? I scooted closer to the window, face almost pressed against the glass. I jumped back as I saw the feet step backwards into the black background. I grabbed the Louisville Slugger that rested in the corner of the room and ran to the back door. I gazed outside to no avail, it was too dark to see anything. I opened the door and shined the flashlight through the forest's edge. If something turned the motion sensor on, it was gone now. It was quiet, and nothing was obviously visible. I shut the door and locked it, grabbing some water as I retreated back to bed. The next morning, as my wife took our daughter to school, I decided to explore a little further into the woods. I walked in the direction I saw the person go. After walking about 1.5 miles, I stumbled upon a tree with a yellow circle painted onto it. Hunters? I pondered to myself. As I continued forward, I ran into another painted tree. Then another. I looked around and noticed they formed a large perimeter around a massive opening in the ground. This cave was immense. I shined my light into the cave, but it's as if the light could not penetrate the thick layers of darkness that resonated out of it. I was immediately submerged in dread. Just staring into the cave was making my brain send fight or flight signals throughout my body. I gripped my flashlight tight and without hesitation, ran as hard as I could back through the woods. My wife had returned home from the school and already left again for work. I tried to open my laptop and get some work done, but I was teeming with anxiety. I didn't even know why. The rest of the day passed by like a foggy dream. My head raced with thoughts as I lay awake in bed. I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples in hopes of finding some relief. I need a drink. I stumble to my feet, grabbing the wall as my head spins. I close my eyes to collect myself. As I open them back up, the motion sensor light fills our room again. I pull the curtain back to see somebody barely in view this time. It was a barefoot little girl. As her face came into view, I saw that it was my daughter Aurora, still in her night clothes and staring directly into my window. Our gazes meet, as she steps back and runs into the forest. "Wait!" I shouted through the window. Parental instinct took over, and before I could even process a thought, I was running through the dense woods. I could hear her scared voice trailing off just ahead of me. I ran for about 15 minutes straight before the adrenaline slowly wore off and I had to stop to catch my breath. A faint light echoed ahead through the trees. I slowly and quietly avoided debris as I crept towards the unknown light, passing the yellow marked trees on my way. A man could be heard aggressively yelling. I poked my head out from behind a tree. A tall, slender man stood with a torch in his hand, surrounded by at least 25 other people. All of them dressed in white, hooded robes and black, featureless masks. They stand in a wide circle at the mouth of the cave and begin chanting what sounded like Latin as one of the hooded figures removed their mask. It was Aurora. Hic ostiarius senex resurge meus, dici quat tuum vestra terra. She turned her gaze to the bitter blackness of the cave and sprinted into it. I stared on in pure horror. Hic ostiarius senex resurge meus, dici quat tuum vestra terra. The ground shook beneath my feet like an unreal earthquake. I fell to the ground and crawled backwards till my back met a tree. I lifted myself up, before gathering the courage to run back through the woods. I could hear the chanting turn to yelling as they continued. "Rise, old one!" A bright light pierced through the edge of the woods leading to my house. I trekked through the overgrowth and brush before being hit by a thick cloud of smoke. I covered my mouth with my shirt and pressed on. When I pierced the edge of the woods, I was met by my house, completely up in flames. Every square inch was burning to a cinder. I fell to my knees. My wife stood in our bedroom, slamming her fists on the window and screaming for help. The smell was insufferable. The hooded figures marched from beyond the wall of smoke towards me. I gasped for air before my face met the cold, hard embrace of the ground. They continued marching forward as I slipped into unconsciousness. My eyes shot open. The clock flashed 3 as my heart raced and sweat trickled down my face. I reached for a water bottle, but my hands were trembling. I sat up to catch my breath, but I was met by my wife, who was sitting up at a 90-degree angle, eyes still sealed shut, and whispering softly into my ear, "He's here," before laying back down. I rubbed my eyes and tried to focus on my breathing. That's when a light beamed through our window.
So is that an everlasting loop? Is that the motif there? It's just an everlasting loop of them going through the same thing over and over again? That's interesting. Let's do a couple big ones. Let's do always check the mileage. Let's do that one. Why not? Let me just copy it over really quick. This octopus is taking longer than I thought. This octopus is a pretty big piece. To that much compared to the other ones I did thus far. The other ones had kind of like pieces to them that were easy to do. But okay, so let's hop all the way down. Hit that and hit play. There you go.
Everybody needs somebody in their life who'll drive them to the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning. Often it won't be your best friend or your housemate. It will be your go-to guy. Always ready to help you install a new kitchen, carry your new mattress home, or clear out your garage. Tom was my go-to guy. He was never happier than when he was putting another cigarette in his mouth, rubbing his hands together, and asking the rest of us, "Okay, what are we doing now?" So when I needed to move my worldly possessions across to the east, he was ready to load my boxes into his car and set off at once across America. I almost felt bad. I warned him that he'd have to drive the whole way back alone. He just smiled and told me that he loved listening to drive time radio. I wasn't in much of a position to turn him down. He had a car. Which is where the trouble began. "What I like about this car is that it's totally worthless," he said, stubbing out a cigarette on the dashboard before retrieving another from behind his ear. "Bumps, scrapes, scratches, prangs even. I don't care. I like not having to worry about it. If I park it somewhere, do I worry about it getting stolen?" He changed gears. "No way. If I came back in the morning and it was gone, I'd shrug my shoulders and find myself another piece of junk. Just as long as it gets me from A to B," he said, chuckling at his own audacity. He was right. It was a worthless piece of shit hatchback. While it looked like garbage, at least it ran and seemed reliable. The mileage was close to 100k. But I wasn't actually worried it was going to break down. With hindsight, this was obviously a mistake. Tom took another drag, his eyes fixed on the road, and said if we were to break down right now I wouldn't even care. I would. Not care. I'd just ditch it and find another. Tom claimed he treated cars like old biros. He picked them up and used them as long as they lasted before finding another. In a world littered with discarded ballpoints, this is a reasonable position to take. I honestly thought it was a wonderfully romantic attitude, even if I didn't really believe him. We alternated driving and sleeping. It didn't take long before I began to go a little loopy. The endless, hypnotic road and intermittent sleep on the passenger side took its toll. Tom was a fun guy to be around, most of the time, but stuck in that car with him I found his personality began to grate. And then he woke me up by flicking my nose, real hard. That pissed me off, and it only got worse when he told me what had happened. We broke down. Aw shit, Tom. Not out here. Don't worry. Stroke of luck. We're half a mile down the road from a gas station and garage. Well, find help and be off again in no time. It did feel good to get out the car. And it wasn't just getting away from the smell of ash, charred plastic, and forgotten takeaway wrappers. It had been so long since I'd even been out of the city. Despite my sore nose, lack of sleep, and possibly being stranded out in the middle of nowhere, the fresh air lifted my spirits. We found the owner of the dilapidated gas station, emerging from garage, wiping his hands on his overalls. He was called Gus and he looked pretty dilapidated himself. Super helpful guy, though. He got from "Can I help you boys?" to looking under the hood in no time. But helpfulness only goes so far. What you boys need is a miracle worker, he conceded after a few minutes tinkering. He stood there pulling at his beard, gazing down at our ruined engine, and I began to get a sinking feeling. We were walking back to the station when Tom spotted it. Gus had offered us his landline to call a tow truck and I was coming to terms with being stuck there for a while. Tom hung back behind on his own sulking, doing his best to reduce another pack to ash. Then he saw it peeking out from behind the station, covered in tarp, nestled among discarded gas tanks. Propped up against the front wheel was a sheet of cardboard with "For Sale" written in marker pen. "How much for it?" Tom shouted after us, pointing. "The car?" "What car?" Gus frowned at him. "This fucking car," Tom said, running over to it in frustration and pulling the canvas off. It was an ancient-looking gray sedan. I couldn't really believe Tom was going to try for it. Gus just stared like it was the first time he'd ever set eyes on it. Tom got in, already acting like the owner, and found the keys still in the ignition. "I'm afraid that car won't even run. You boys don't want anything to do with it." "Nothing but trouble." Tom ignored him and turned the ignition. The car gave out a sad, gasping little whine. I was relieved. The tow truck was far more appealing to me. But Tom tried again, and this time the engine roared to life. Tom's eyes widened, a child in awe of the magic head unleashed. He smiled at me through the dusty windshield. There was no denying that the car ran. There was something almost unnatural about it, on reflection. I don't know jack about car maintenance, but you can't leave a car outside for a year, a decade, God knows how long, and then just expect it to run perfectly. On sight it looked like the doors should have been falling off, but it managed to tow our busted old hatchback to the gas station no problem. I checked the tires, and found the treads in good order. Tom turned on the headlights and the golden beams poured forth into the settling dusk. "Road legal," he hollered, leaping from the car. I don't know how much Tom paid for the vehicle. I didn't bother to ask. I suspect that Gus may have just swapped it for ours. Probably just happy to be rid of it. Hey, it even has a perfect cup holder, said Tom as I buckled in on the passenger side. One thing I noticed the car didn't have was any kind of distinguishing features aside from the license plate. No make or model. It was disturbingly generic. You know, you can spend a lot of money on a fancy car. Top of the line, but useless cup holders. Tom had the wind of vindication in his sails. He had lived up to his professed ideals. I wasn't going to burst that bubble, so I decided to get some sleep and hope he was a little more bearable when I woke up. The last thing I remember before nodding off was him noticing the odometer. "Hey, weird," he said. The miles seemed to be running backwards. The car hit something hard and I was abruptly awake again. I knew immediately that it hadn't been a pothole. "What the hell, Tom?" I said, writhing from cramps in my seat. "Were you asleep at the wheel? Do you even know what we hit?" "Shit. I dunno. Maybe I was asleep. Could have been a pothole." He brought the car to a standstill in the middle of the road. "No way that was a pothole," I said, unbuckling and opening the side door. It was past midnight. There was a new moon and the lack of lights on the horizon told me we really were far away from civilization this time. I grabbed my torch from my backpack and started to investigate. The first thing I noticed was that the trunk had come open. The latch must have slipped. Maybe the car wasn't as robust as we first thought. "You see to the trunk and check nothing else has come apart," I said. "I'll see what we hit." If we really had hit something, it had long gone. Without a trace. And there wasn't a pothole in sight. I must have walked a couple of 100 meters back down the road when I heard the trunk door slam shut. I turned around. Tom was gone. Just the car sat in the middle of the road. Lights blazing. No one inside. I called out for him. I shone my torch all around across the scrub on either side of the road. Nothing out there. Just patches of wood in the middle distance and the remains of some fencing. I called out some more and carefully inspected all around the car. I even looked underneath. Nothing. I pulled out my phone. The signal was non-existent, but I tried calling him anyway. Nothing. I kept on looking, retracing my steps, and second-guessing my own efforts. Soon 20 minutes had passed and I was panicking. Or to put it another way, I was scared. I wanted to get the hell away. But there was one place I still hadn't looked. Inexplicable and as impossible as it was. I stood staring at the trunk. I slid my fingers under the silver handle to release the latch. Jammed. I struggled with it, but there was no way I was going to be able to open it, short of tearing it open with a crowbar. And what did I expect to find? The books, clothes, and CDs I already knew were packed in there? I spent another 10 minutes shouting into night and trying to wave the darkness away with my torch before I decided that no reasonable person would blame me for driving off. We'd been navigating by road map and though I roughly knew where we were. Google Maps left me a hovering gray dot 100 miles back, so that was as good as I was going to get. I set off in the direction of what I hoped was the nearest town. Tom's packet of cigarettes and lighter were sitting on the dash. I ignored the feeling that I was abandoning my friend to the specters lurking in the night. After all, how can you abandon someone who isn't even there? Tired, nervous, and frightened, I almost swung the car clean off the road 20 minutes down the road when the ringtone erupted. I settled the car to a halt and realized it wasn't my phone, which I knew was in my pocket. It was coming from the glove compartment. I opened it up to find Tom's phone. I took the call. "Hey, is that Tom?" came a distant voice. "No sir. This is Alex." It was hard to tell, but I guessed it was Gus on the other end. He sounded out of sorts. "Well, you guys need to know," he said before breaking off. "Need to know what?" I almost screamed. "Well, I'm not sure if I really should have sold you that car." "Why not?" "Well, I don't think it really belongs to me." "Whose is it then?" I replied, terrified for a second I might have to drive my way back to Gus Station to return the godforsaken vehicle. "Well, I'm not sure you could really call it anybody's." I waited for him to go on, but he just remained quietly breathing down the line. "Is there anything else I should know about this car?" "Just watch the mileage, okay? Be real careful about the mileage," he said and hung up. I tried calling back, but the signal had vanished. I kept on driving, setting aside the growing fear that I was lost. I knew for a fact that I was lost when the flashing lights of a level crossing appeared out of the night. A freight train was approaching, so I stopped at the tracks to watch the iron caravan rumble past. I was snapped out of that trance by someone slamming into the car's tail. I swung round in my seat to see a half-naked figure, jeans and socks, running off into the night. As brief as my glimpse was, I swore that it was Tom. The freight train passed and I hit the gas. Totally floored it for 5 good minutes before I saw the road sign telling me I was a few miles outside a reasonable-sized town. I slowed down and let the relief wash over me. I almost felt like laughing at how ridiculous it all was. I looked at the odometer. Exactly 2 miles remaining. And then it dropped down to 1. I braked hard and got out. I didn't want to find out what happened when we reached mile 0. I decided right then that the car was cursed. To hell with it. I grabbed my rucksack, containing all my most essential items, checked my flashlight, and walked the final mile into town. 8 hours of sleep in a motel, followed by a hot shower and a meal, does wonders for your sense of perspective. I told my story to Hank, a large dumpling of a man with a walrus mustache that twitched when he smiled. I was eating my breakfast at the diner and he was having lunch. As I imagine is not uncommon with truck drivers, he was eager to hear a tale from the road. He thought mine was hilarious. "I don't think there's no mystery there, bud," he laughed. "Your friend went off to take a leak and when he got back you'd hightailed it. But who takes that long to piss? Maybe he slipped, bumped his head, out for the count, lying in the bushes somewhere. Heard 1,000 stories like it. So how did he get to the rail crossing? That wasn't him. You just thought it was. You really saw some local hijinks. Who knows what kind of dumb depravity goes on around these parts? Some kids fooling around nearly gave you a heart attack." I still wasn't satisfied. I hadn't told him about the odometer. I was glad I hadn't. "Listen," he said, settling his bill, "I'll give you a lift to where you left your car if it hasn't already been stolen or broken into." Before we even left the diner we discovered that there was a considerable disparity between what we could find on the map, and what I remembered happening during the night. Based on the actual location of the level crossing, my orientation had been completely off. The gas station didn't appear to exist and Hank, nor any of the other drivers there knew of any garage matching the description. "Frankly, I'm surprised you aren't still out there driving in circles," said Hank, folding up the map. "Geez, Google Maps has a lot to answer for, if you ask me." I was worried that Hank was beginning to take me for a time waster. But he was as good as his word and drove me out in his truck. We passed the level crossing having seen nothing of the car, and I began to suspect he was finding me a little less amusing. "It's gone," I said. "Someone must have taken it." "You still have the keys?" "No. I left them in the ignition," I realized. "Why'd you do a damn foolish thing like that?" "Because I didn't feel like I was allowed to take them," I thought to myself. "Well, let's keep on going and just see what we find." I'd given up, but within a few minutes we spotted a cairn of brown boxes in the distance. As we approached, I realized it was my belongings, half piled up, half dumped on the roadside. "Well, that settles it," laughed Hank, his good humor returned. "How so?" "Why would anyone steal a worthless car, but dump all the valuable stuff that's inside it?" "It weren't thieves. It was your pal, Tom. He must have caught up with you. Or the car at least. But there is no way he could have done that on foot. Then he hitched a ride from a passing car. Or lorry." I stared at Hank for a moment as he let that hang there. "He gets out when he finds the car abandoned. He's mad at you for taking off and never wants to see your sorry ass again. So he unloads your stuff, and takes off back home." Whether Hank knew something I didn't, that story made a lot of sense. However much it didn't allay the weirdness I still felt. We loaded my boxes into the truck and Hank dropped me off at the next town. I finished my journey in a rental, sequestering myself away in a motel for the final night of traveling. I still had Tom's phone, so I had to resort to Facebook to try and re-establish contact. Unfortunately, he had either deleted his account or just blocked me. More confirmation, I guess, of how angry he was. It was one of those bitter outcomes I relegate to deeds I'd never have the opportunity to apologize for. I ignored the little voice inside my head that warned me that perhaps I still had that final mile left to drive.
I just realized I had my mic muted. That was an interesting story about cars. I personally never heard that many stories, or horror stories about cars. And it's cool to always like diverse over to that. If that was a true story, then I'm assuming like you would be mad. I don't think that's a real, like, if it is true, I don't think like it's haunted or anything. I think it's just, you know, tales being told to like scare people out of the car. But otherwise, minus that, then we have a couple more stories can probably fit in here, be in the sense that we have about 20 minutes to maybe 60 minutes left, so we might do one or two more, and then we'll call it a stream. I do like these types of streams, like just to sit back and listen instead of having to do stuff. So again, if you guys have anything that you would rather hear about, let me know. Oh, so this is a part of a series. Hold up. Okay, see, there's this one, but it says part 4. I want part 3, 5, lyrics. Part 5. This is part 4. Okay, so this guy has a series. I'll start playing the series then. Start with part 1. So I've got another 911 hang up. So this guy, I'm assuming, is a cop, and he has a story to tell. So this one, these comes in parts. These seem to be pretty chunky, so it might fit part 1 and part 2, and if we do this again, it'll probably fit for part 3. But it sounds like this guy's a cop who gets 911 hang-ups, so we're about to see what happened to this man.
In case you don't know, I'm a rookie cop in a small, rural, Pennsylvania town currently stuck working the night shift. I work your normal patrol shift, driving around pulling traffic, responding to your usual domestic disputes and whatever other wonderful calls dispatch sends my way. Last week was crazy at work for me. You can read about it here, and right as I thought life was returning to normal, I now find myself in the eye of yet another unsettling investigation. I woke up early afternoon to a purring on my chest. Holly. This cat has become the love of my life since we found each other about a week ago. However, I could do without my new vibrating alarm clock. I gave her a few scratches before guiding her off my chest. I glanced at the clock and saw it was already 1,300 hours. I got out of bed, showered, and slowly began preparing to go in for work that night. I put on my uniform, geared up, and headed out the door. Roll call was pretty short and sweet since we were getting busy and Sergeant Oakley wanted bodies on the road as soon as possible. Right before breaking, Sergeant Oakley made sure to add, "And Barkley, try not to have another shitstorm follow you, yet." "Yes, Sarge, I was going to try and make a shitstorm, but now that you told me not to, I guess I won't. I might be one of very few females in the department. But most of the guys appreciate my thick skin and sarcasm." I was in the middle of a conversation when dispatch interrupted me. "Dispatch to 1034. 1034, go ahead. Are you able to respond to a 911 hang-up?" "Affirmative." "What's the address?" "Old Schoolhouse Road." "Show me en route." I racked my cruiser and headed towards the house. Every time someone calls 911 and hangs up, we are obligated to respond if dispatch is unable to call back and speak with someone. As the rookie, I am quite familiar with responding to these hang-ups, a little too familiar. I turned down the gravel road, kicking up dust in my Taurus's path. I stopped a few yards away from the old log cabin and approached quietly. To my surprise, there was an elderly woman sitting in her floral chair watching television. I didn't see anyone else in the house, so I approached and knocked. "Officer Barkley with the police department. Please come to the front door." The woman slowly raised herself from her chair and held onto her walker. She came to the front door and greeted me. "Hello there, officer, is there something wrong?" "Ma'am, is everything all right? We received a 911 hang-up from this residence." She responded, "Oh yes, everything is just fine here, officer. It was probably just my husband." I became more alert and instantly asked, "Where is your husband?" "I need to go check to make sure he's all right then." She shrugged her shoulders and pointed towards the fireplace. "He's right there, officer." I looked to where she was pointing, but nobody was there. I became concerned. "Ma'am, I don't see your husband. Can you please tell me what room he is in?" She slowly walked over to the mantel and pointed to the center. "He's here, officer." She pointed to an urn. "Oh, I see him now. I am so sorry for your loss." I wasn't sure what the response to that was going to be, but I knew it was important to not mislead her and pretend that he was still alive. "Yes, why thank you. Saying sorry is such an odd tradition, don't you think? I mean, I know you aren't the reason he died. Anywho, I'm sorry that you came out for that. Ever since Samuel passed a few months ago, he's been messing with the wires. He turns the lights on and off, and I keep getting phone calls saying they are returning my call, but I never called them. I guess it's his way of letting me know he's still here with me. I don't really believe in the paranormal, but that doesn't mean it doesn't freak me out. I gave the woman a heartfelt smile and reached out my hand. I'm sorry I didn't get to formally introduce myself. I'm Sarah Barkley. Please feel free to call me Sarah. Oh, hi Sarah, I'm Rose. It is very nice to meet you. Again, I'm sorry you got called out here for nothing. I'm sure you have much more important places to be. No, it's quite alright, this is an important call to me. However, per my department's protocol, I need to check your home to make sure that there isn't anyone else in here who could have made the call. Is that alright? Yes, of course, I understand. I'll just sit out here. I've been home all day though, there certainly isn't anyone here but me. She settled back into her chair and continued watching her television as if I wasn't even there. I started to check the first floor of the cabin. I cleared the kitchen, then the family room, and made my way to the master bedroom. I made sure to check every closet and everywhere that a person could physically fit to hide. First floor was clear, so I headed to the basement. I saw an old workbench covered in different machines and tools used for loading ammunition. I know these items quite well since it's a hobby my dad has had for years. Everything was covered in dust and looked as though loading ammunition was an old hobby of Samuel's. I could see he had an assortment of empty clean shells lined up on a tray as if he was preparing to load them. He had a very fine antique loading press that I know would make my dad jealous. I wondered if Rose knew the value of these antiques. As I made my way down his workbench, I was impressed with his organization and tidiness. It was all set up, ready for him to return to work at any moment. I glanced towards the corner to the cellar door, where I saw his jacket hanging on a single hook. I began to wonder if Rose has been waiting for him to come home after all these months. I made my way around to the laundry room and finally headed back upstairs after clearing the basement, wedging my duty belt between the stair railing and the chair lift that Rose had installed. I made my way upstairs, and walked through the family room to another set of stairs leading to a second-floor loft. I slowly walked up the stairs and opened the door to the loft bedroom. I could smell the stale air from a room that clearly has not been used in years. I checked the closet and under the bed, nothing. Right as I went to leave, I noticed a small cubby door in the corner behind the door. Again, I had to check anywhere that a person could possibly hide, so I opened the cubby door with my left hand, holding my gun in my right hand. The storage space was pitch black. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it. The cubby space was nearly empty except for an old lamp, a wooden sled, and an old trunk with brass locks. When I looked at the old trunk, every hair on the back of my neck stood up and goosebumps covered my arms. My intuition has saved my life many times, so I have learned to follow it. I slowly crawled through the cubby, making my way towards the trunk. I opened the lid and found a trunk full of various items, no person hiding in here. I released an audible sigh of relief. I decided to drag this trunk out of the cubby, especially since I knew Rose was unable to walk up those stairs and I thought maybe this would be something she would like to know about. I hollered over the loft railing, "Rose, there's an old trunk in this cubby hole. Did you know that was up here?" Rose replied, "What? What trunk?" I decided to carry it down to her to let her look through it. I set it down at her feet and opened it. I could see it much clearer now that we were in the light. There were old newspaper clippings, photographs, and old clothing. One photograph in particular caught Rose's eye. She leaned over and picked up the photograph, caressing the edges. She began to cry and my immediate response was to comfort her. "Rose, I'm so sorry." "What's wrong?" She sat and cried for a few moments. When she was able to answer, she said, "It's a photograph of my granddaughter. I not only lost her once, I lost her twice. Sometimes the pain is just too much to bear." I asked, "What do you mean you lost her twice?" Rose responded, "Don't you know, honey? My granddaughter was Michelle Klein, the woman the police found in the Patch Lane house."
I don't know about that one. I don't understand it completely. But we're gonna hop to the second one because they're all in order here, and they seem to be short bits, and I feel like we could fit the majority of them, and I'll probably go over time, just so I could, you know, go over it. Here is the next one. This is part 2 of the Copland. Let's see here. Didn't copy anything else. Okay, here we go. Part 2.
I couldn't control my facial expression as my jaw dropped open. "Wait, Michelle Klein was your granddaughter?" I knew I was repeating what she just said, but I was still processing this piece of information. "Yes, you look surprised. Were you one of the officers who found her?" "Oh Rose, yes I was. I am so sorry for your loss. I guess I always thought she was more of a transient and had no idea that she had family left in the area. Well, I think I'm the only family left here. Michelle's children went to live with their aunt, my daughter, down in Maryland after we believed she died 20 years ago. I knew Michelle's children were in Maryland because the U.S. Marshals told me they were going to drive down personally to notify her children and tell them how their mother was in the witness protection program all these years. I had so many questions for Rose now. I tried to pace myself. What was your relationship with Michelle like? She was less like a granddaughter and more like a daughter to me. I love Michelle's mother very much. She is my daughter, but she has her flaws. She became heavily involved with the Catholic Church when she married Michelle's father. So, when Michelle came home and told them she was pregnant and going to be raising a child alone, they kicked her out of their house. I don't think it was even 6 months before they ended up moving out west to be closer to Alan's family." "Alan?" "Yes, Michelle's father." "Oh, sorry. So what did Michelle do when they kicked her out?" "She had nowhere to go. Samuel and I took her in and helped her through her pregnancy. It wasn't too long after the first one was born that she was pregnant again. We let her stay here through her second pregnancy as well." "Oh God, and then the accident happened." "What accident?" "Michelle was driving down the road to work, she was a waitress, and got hit head-on by a drunk driver. She was 7 months pregnant and we didn't know if either of them was going to make it. I think that night took years off my life." I cringed as the scene of the accident ran through my mind. "That is so terrifying." "Yes, it was," Rose replied. "As I'm sure you can figure out, they both made it. They performed an emergency cesarean section and Michelle suffered a severe brain injury, but with therapy and the right doctors she made a full recovery. I was dying to know how Michelle ended up at Patch Lane. And when did she move out of your home? Oh, let's see, probably about 10 months after the accident. I know it wasn't a full year yet. She ended up starting her own business and made more than twice what she was making as a waitress. Being that this is such a small town, everyone knows who owns each local business. I was surprised to hear Michelle started her own business. I had never heard of her or her business. What business did she start? Rose's eyes widened slightly and she inhaled deeply. Well, now, that's an interesting story that might take us a while. I was so engrossed in Rose's information, I leaned in closer. I have time, Rose. All right. Well, after Michelle's accident she didn't feel the same. She started experiencing strange things that no one could explain. I wasn't sure where Rose was going with this. Like medically? No, not like that. She started having thoughts, memory-like thoughts, that weren't real memories and had never happened to her. She would be confused on why she just randomly had that thought, and then within a day's notice her vision would come true. This conversation was not going where I thought it was. However, I was still intrigued and I could tell Rose felt embarrassed because she knew how this all sounded. Rose continued, I know how this must all sound. If it weren't for seeing it with my own eyes I wouldn't have believed it either. I couldn't help myself and asked, what exactly did you see with your own eyes? I'll never forget her first vision. We were all in the family room playing cards and unwinding since she just got home from work. Out of nowhere, she started crying. At first, I thought it was hormones since it wasn't long after her second child. She said she didn't know why she was crying. But quickly, she started rocking back and forth in her seat. She kept repeating, no, no, no. This isn't happening. This isn't real. I started crying just at the sight of her. Samuel had no idea whether he should console her or sit back, he just stared in disbelief. I held her for nearly 20 minutes until she could finally speak. She said someone she loved was dead. I assured her everyone was okay, but she just kept saying someone's dead. I had goosebumps up my arms. So what happened? We finally got her calmed down and put her to bed. It wasn't even 7 a.m. when we woke up to the phone ringing. Samuel answered it and I'll never forget his face. I never have seen so much pain in his eyes as that very moment. He slowly lowered the phone and grabbed my hand. I asked him what was wrong and he told me Mary, Michelle's sister, overdosed last night. I had no words, no response. Suddenly everything around me felt more vivid. The rain outside sounded like it was knocking on the window to come inside. I didn't even notice it was raining until now. I stared at Rose's face and could see every line on her forehead, every wrinkle on her cheek. I noticed my breathing slowed. I don't even believe in this stuff, but I felt almost frozen in time as I absorbed everything Rose was telling me. Rose took a sip of her glass of water and didn't let the silence bother her. She continued, and ever since then they only got clearer and more precise. It eventually came to the point where she could tell us who was calling before we picked up the phone. It became normal to us and we treated it like a game. This gift really changed her when we were walking through the park one evening. Michelle felt a heaviness on her chest that she couldn't shake. I was concerned she was having a heart attack because of how she was acting. She somehow knew this wasn't medical and said she was feeling a spirit connecting to her. Rose closed her eyes and relived the moment. Oh, Michelle had me so worried. I held on to her, and after a few minutes passed, she opened her eyes and began crying hysterically. She told me a little girl was buried there. She would not let it go, and we eventually called the police out. There was a nice officer working that evening who listened to every word Michelle told him and never rolled his eyes once. You know, I think he had something happen in his own life that he was a believer long before we called him. He decided to get a shovel and start digging on his own before calling for backup, given the circumstances. It took him about 15 minutes, but he eventually found a trash bag. He stopped digging and didn't even open the bag before calling for backup and started wrapping police tape around the park. I felt like a child during story time. I couldn't stop asking questions. So was there a body? What was in the bag? Rose let out a sigh. Oh yes, there was a body of a young girl. That's a sight I'll never forget. The police questioned Michelle, but it didn't take them long to rule her out as a suspect, and they slowly started using her for help with other cases. I tried to draw all of these pieces of information together and figure out how it could possibly relate to Patch Lane. I asked, how did Michelle eventually end up living at Patch Lane? Samuel and I didn't want Michelle to move out. We were concerned for her and the kids' safety, and we really loved having them here. But Michelle felt it was important to be an independent mother for those children and started searching for a safe, but affordable home. She looked mostly in this area so that we could still help with watching the kids. One day she was at the corner store grabbing some milk and saw a paper taped to the bulletin board for a house for rent. It was surprisingly affordable and not far from our cabin, so she left the store and drove straight to the house on Patch Lane. She became immediately drawn to the house, like a moth to a flame. As soon as she got home, she called the number on the paper and said she would take it. Imagine my surprise when I got home that evening and she told me she was moving into the old house on Patch Lane. Everyone around here knows the stories of that old farm, but somehow those stories never got to Michelle. What happened after she moved into Patch Lane? Moving into that house was a blessing and a curse. She finally gained the independence that she so desperately sought, but it came at a price. The visions became overwhelming. She barely slept at night. The visions became so intense that the line between reality and visions was slowly fading. She always talked about hearing a spirit tell her she needed to check out the basement. She found that old door with the lock on it and even called Samuel over one day and asked him to help her remove the lock. Now you know, we're old-fashioned here and we don't go snooping in other people's business. Samuel told Michelle not to go snooping and told her to mind her own business. He refused to help her open that lock. She didn't know how to open it herself without cutting it with bolt cutters, which wasn't an option since she didn't want the landlord to find out. I remembered that when I first approached Patch Lane I still saw the rusty lock on the door, so there was no way she could have gotten into that basement room unless she found the underground tunnel. I asked, so then how did she eventually get into that room? Oddly enough, she wasn't the one that found the root cellar passage, it was her kids. One day they were playing in the yard and started jumping on something. The loud clank of the metal got Michelle's attention and she ran over to find the root cellar door. She put the kids inside and went back to the root cellar. She opened the door, walked down the stairs, and through the tunnel. She came to a hatch, and she opened it. She found herself in that locked room in the basement. She called me immediately after she found that room. I remember it clear as day. A single tear made its way down Rose's cheek, making a path straight over each wrinkle. Rose added, as soon as Michelle got into that room she had the worst vision yet. She saw her own death.
Sorry guys, I'm back. So that was part 2 of the cop story. Sorry, I was talking to somebody, family-wise, about stuff. So, that was part 2. I kind of want to finish this course. We're gonna finish up with part 3. There is a part 4 and 5, but again, we'll probably get it in the next time we can pick up on the story. It is a very intriguing story. I do like it quite a bit. But we'll get back to it. Once we what's it called? Once we do this again another time. But yeah, here we go. Here's part 3 of the cop story.
The rain turned into a monsoon. I heard thunder rumble in the distance, followed by lightning less than 2 seconds apart. I was taking a sip of water and trying to imagine what it would be like to envision my own death. Before I could even ask any further questions, Rose continued. That was really when things got bad. Michelle found things in that room she shouldn't have and she wanted to go to the police, but for some reason she said she didn't know if she could trust them. Instead, she went straight to the feds. Well, you know where it went from there. I had a thought rush into my head. Rose, do you know who the father of Michelle's children is? Rose nodded her head and said, yes, I do. Who? I asked. Rose took a deep breath. He was a cook at the restaurant Michelle worked at. He would force himself on her, and she just didn't say no. That job was the only thing she had for quite some time and she was worried if she said anything that she would end up being the one in trouble. In a town this small, there weren't many jobs for her to choose from. My heart ached for Michelle. I can't believe she had to go through that. Oh Rose, I am so sorry, that must have been so hard for her. All we could do was try to help her. She even started trusting men again and started dating someone right around the time she moved to Patch Lane, but she was very secretive about his identity. All she told us was that he was a good man and would be a great father to her kids, if things went in that direction. So dispatch interrupted me. Dispatch to all units. Dispatch to all units. Please respond to River Road for flash flooding. We just received 6 calls coming in that the river has risen past the road and barricades need to be put up. 1045, show me en route. Of course Tim is one of the first to respond, he's one of the most active officers we have. Shortly later I heard the rest jump on the radio. 1039, on my way. 1052, en route. I joined. 1034, you can show me leaving old schoolhouse and it'll be en route. I turned to Rose. Rose, I have so many more questions for you. Would you mind if I stopped back over tomorrow night? Rose gently threw both hands in the air. Oh, of course. You are welcome back here anytime, Sarah. I hope you don't think I'm just some crazy old lady. I assured Rose that I believed everything she told me and I would love to come by tomorrow night. She walked me to the door and handed me a hot mug of coffee. You can bring the mug back tomorrow when you see me. I thanked Rose and headed down to River Road to start damage control. It took me almost 15 minutes to get there because of how quickly the roads flooded. I arrived on scene and we all were able to barricade the flooded road to prevent any vehicles from falling victim to the rising waters. I was on scene of various flooding incidents until the end of my shift. I was beyond soaking wet, and the first thing I did when I got home was strip naked and take a hot shower. Hallie's new thing was to sit on the toilet and watch me the entire time I shower. At first I thought it was creepy, but then I started to think she was concerned I was drowning every time I showered because she just looked so concerned as she sat there. I got out of the shower and gave Holly one of her bedtime treats. I laid in bed scratching her until we both fell asleep. Ring 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 ring, what the hell? My alarm wouldn't shut off. Then I realized it was my phone. I answered in a groggy voice, "Hello? Hey Sarah, it's Dad. I'm sorry, did I just wake you?" "Yeah, but it's fine. Is everything alright?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine. But the basement flooded pretty bad. I was hoping you could stop by here for a few hours before you go back to work tonight to help me move all these boxes upstairs." I never say no to my dad. I'm a daddy's girl and we've always had each other's back. "Of course Dad, I'll be right over. You want me to grab lunch for us? Pizza? You read my mind, sweetie." I pulled up to my dad's house and carried the pizza inside. He came upstairs and we each scarfed down a couple slices before heading downstairs to tackle this disaster. He had already done a lot of the heavy lifting by himself, which of course I didn't like. "Dad, you should have waited until I got here to do all of this." "Don't worry, I still saved a lot for you. Can you help me carry up all of these cardboard boxes in this corner? Just set them all in the family room." I began carrying the boxes up, one by one. I came across one box labeled Teresa and couldn't help myself but to open it. It was all old photographs and clothing of my mom's. My dad saw me going through the photographs and came over and took some from my hands. He sat down and quietly admitted, "I miss her so damn much. Do you realize how much you look like her?" Whenever someone tells me I look like my mother, it's the best compliment I could ever receive. I don't care about being called pretty or gorgeous, but when I am told I look like her, I just can't help but smile. "I know Dad, I miss her too. It's hard to believe it's been over 20 years. We talked about our old memories and we agreed that we should probably go visit her grave later today to make sure the flooding didn't damage the cemetery or the flowers that we keep around her site." I gathered myself and started carrying more boxes back upstairs. By about my fourth trip up, one of the boxes was so saturated that the bottom broke and items spilled all over the stairs. I started picking up old uniform shirts of my dad's and some sports memorabilia that he had tucked away. When I picked up one of the uniform shirts, a photograph fell out. I picked it up to see if it was another picture of my mom, and to my surprise, it wasn't. It was a photograph of me, when I was about 5 years old or so, standing next to a woman I found very familiar at a carnival or fair. Within the 2 seconds my brain was processing who it was in the photograph, my dad came over and snatched the photograph from my hand. "What are you doing?" he yelled. This was not like my dad at all. I was so confused. "Dad, I looked again at the photograph he was holding in his hand. The wires in my brain finally connected. I knew who the woman was in the picture with me. It was Michelle Klein.
So that's interesting. So Michelle Klein is the woman they were talking about, like, who disappeared, which means, like, that woman with the case was the mother, or I don't know. I'm confused. I kind of want to hear part 4 to confirm my suspicions. So really quick, I'm just play part 4 right now. Let's go to scroll up. Part 4. Okay, so this one seems to be a bit chunky as well, but we'll do it anyway because I'm kind of interested.
Why was there a photograph of Michelle standing there with me? This made no sense. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I'm not sure if it was shock or utter confusion my dad saw in my eyes, but as soon as he locked eyes with mine he knew I figured it out. How about we go sit down upstairs and talk, Sarah? I didn't want to sit down. I felt a whirlwind of different emotions rush through my body and I began to feel dizzy. I grabbed onto the old wooden stair railing and caught my balance. What the hell is going on, Dad? Sarah, let's just go sit down and talk. I didn't want to go sit down, but my body gave me no choice. We went upstairs and I sat down on the couch. My dad walked into the kitchen and I heard Pop. He walked back out with a bottle of Merlot in one hand, and 2 glasses in the other. He sat down and poured each of us a glass. This was always your mother's favorite one, he said with a shaky tone. I looked up at him and saw he had a tear rolling down his cheek, past his mouth, and dripped onto his hand. I needed answers and I needed them now. I asked, Dad, why do you have that photograph? He took a long sip of his glass of wine and began his explanation. Oh, where do I even begin? I met Michelle many years ago, only a couple months after your mom passed. I was on duty and got a call for service in the park. Michelle had, she found something there. I stopped him. I spoke with Michelle's grandmother, Rose, and she told me about Michelle's gift. My dad's eyebrows raised and he slowly nodded his head. Ah, so you know. Well, Michelle sensed that there was a young girl buried in the park and sure enough, there was. We were all so impressed with her gift we began using her for help with our unsolved cases. Michelle and I got to spend a lot of time together working those cases and we became very good friends. One thing led to another, and we became romantically involved. My dad glanced down and shook his head. I was so happy and yet I was so guilty and ashamed for being happy so soon after your mother passed. We agreed it would be best not to tell anyone about us. Whenever we wanted some normalcy, we took you kids to the amusement park in the city and we just told you we were friends. That's where that photograph was taken. Why didn't you tell me all of this when I started asking you about Patch Lane and about Michelle Klein? My tone grew louder as I began to become angry that my dad, my best friend, lied to me. Well, I didn't lie, Sarah. I told you I had been to Patch Lane for that ATF raid, which was true. I had been there before I ever met Michelle. I just left out the fact that I had been there additional times. He paused, and then continued, and you never actually asked me about Michelle. You were here talking to Tim about her. When I heard you say her name, my heart stopped. I thought she died 20 years ago, and that's the God's honest truth. First your mom, then Michelle. I just kinda gave up hope after I lost Michelle. Well, at least when I thought I had lost her. When you asked me about the tenants in that house, I just did my best to describe her, but like I said, she had a reputation around town and she wasn't the kind of girl our family and friends would want me seeing. Of course, the reputation was entirely unfounded and I just wished I could have helped her out of it. I could feel the anger stir inside my gut. How the hell can you say that wasn't lying to me? You're right. By omitting the truth, I lied. I'm so sorry, sweetie. I didn't tell you when you were little because of how soon your mom had passed. You barely even understood what death was back then. And as time went on, there was no need to bring up the past. So then what did happen to Michelle, Dad? Moving into that house was a horrible mistake for her. That house was haunted by its past and its present. Her gift became more of a curse and I always worried it would be her downfall. She knew she was destined to die in that house. Nobody should ever have to experience what she did. When she found all of the guns in that hidden tunnel and in that room, she called me immediately. She wanted to report it to the police, but I remembered what happened last time that happened. There was a mole in the department and they gave Joseph a heads up before the ATF raid, so he had time to get out of there. He eventually just found new hidden root cellars and tunnels and rooms to hide his stuff in all over that farmland. I gave her the phone number of a friend of mine in ATF and I'm not sure what happened after that, but somehow she ended up in witness protection. And Tim? Did he know all of this and lie to me too? I was actually screaming by this point. What? Tim? Oh God, no, he didn't know anything. He's a straight arrow, Sarah, you know that. He's there when you need him, follows the rules, and never sticks his nose where it shouldn't be. He still doesn't know any of this. I could feel the smoke pouring from my ears. I chugged the rest of my wine and stormed out the door. My dad began to call out for me to wait, but I kept going. I felt so hurt, so betrayed that he lied to me after all of these years. I sped home and immediately opened a new bottle of Riesling. I opted for a white this time because I was in the mood for chugging, not sipping. I didn't know how to cope with this stress, but I knew how to drink. I quickly emailed Sergeant Oakley and told him I was going to use some unscheduled vacation time because of some personal family matters I had to deal with. Sergeant Oakley may be tough, but he's a firm believer that if you aren't 100% mentally at work, then you need to take a vacation day because you're only putting your life and your co-workers' lives at risk by being there. I grabbed my glass of Riesling and went into the bathroom to draw a bath. I ran the water, added some bubbles, and tested the water with my right toes first. Perfect. I stripped down and slid into the tub, closing my eyes as I slid under the water. I could hear the rain outside my bathroom window beating down rhythmically. It's been raining here for days now, and while I hate the flooding and the horror that comes with it, I love the sound of rain. Shit. I just remembered that I promised Rose I would go back and see her tonight. I leaned over the tub and texted Tim to swing by. I figured I could ask him to return her mug and let her know I would be back in a few days. He said he would stop by after roll call. I hopped out of the tub, put on my favorite, comfiest sweatpants and curled up on the couch with Holly. I began to feel like she was the only one I could truly trust and who never has betrayed me. I heard a knock at the door and jumped off my couch to let Tim in. I opened the door and was startled when it wasn't Tim standing there. There was a girl about my age standing in front of me. She had long blonde hair and I must admit she was very pretty. She looked straight at me and said, "Sarah Barkley?" I was a bit on edge, so I hesitantly answered, yes. "Hi, I know you don't know me, but I'm Samantha. You were working a case involving my mother, Michelle Klein." I scooped my jaw off the floor and said the first words I could get out, "Oh, hi." Thankfully Samantha didn't let my awkwardness interrupt her. She continued, "I'm here because I think there's something you need to know." I finally could formulate a real sentence and offered her to come inside. She accepted and I asked, "What am I supposed to know?" When the marshals spoke to my brother and I, they said the reason our mom came out from hiding was because she found out my brother had brain cancer and was dying. I responded, "Yes, that is true." They told me the same thing. "Yeah, that's the problem." I was confused. "What? My brother doesn't have brain cancer. He's perfectly fine. He never had cancer, he doesn't even take medication for anything. He's perfectly healthy." My mind began racing. Who said that he had cancer? Did Michelle tell the marshals or did they tell her? Why? Who would lie about that? I verbalized some of my questions. "Do you know who told her that he had brain cancer?" "Yes." "Well, kind of. The marshals told me that they were the ones who told her because they received notification. They said they constantly kept checks on my brother and I to make sure we weren't in any danger. When I asked them for specifics, they said they would have to go back and check their Klein case file and check who signed off on the supplemental report. When they went to check it though, it was gone. My gut tells me I can trust the two marshals I spoke to, but now I don't know who falsely notified them that my brother had cancer." I began to realize, somebody intentionally lured Michelle out of hiding and knew that if Joseph Mueller saw her, he would kill her. "Listen, Samantha, I absolutely want to look into this further, but I just used some vacation time and took off these next few days. I'm happy to help you next week though." Samantha nodded her head in disappointment. "I know, I'm sorry I even bothered you at home. I got your address from your chief. I was honestly pretty surprised he gave it out, but he said you wouldn't mind me stopping by. Goddamn Chief Fox. No surprise there." Samantha continued, "I just wanted to offer my help though." I appreciated the offer and asked, "Thank you, how can I get a hold of you if I need you?" Samantha gave me her phone number and her hotel address where she has been staying in town. I reassured her, "I'll look into this, I promise, and I will let you know what I find." I just remembered about Rose's cup that I still had. "Oh, and I have your great-grandmother's coffee mug, long story, but if you see her while you're in town can you give this back to her?" Samantha looked at me confused and asked, "Which great-grandmother are you referring to?" "Rose. Your mom's grandma she used to live with when you were little." Samantha looked like she just saw a ghost and told me, Officer Barkley, Grandma Rose passed away a few years ago. I'm going to need more than just one vacation day. I'll update all of you when I return to work."
Holy cow. So that means the Grandma Rose that we started the story with doesn't even exist. Holy shit, this story turns it up on its end. The story is actually getting pretty good. I'm glad we read these horror stories, and I almost finished box 1 of Coloring Pixels. For those who are wondering once again, like, why a lot of the color is kind of faded, I kind of thought to add to the atmosphere we did black and white primarily. So I did remove quite a bit of saturation from the stuff that you saw me drawing on. But yeah, so that was that. I'm glad we got to witness that. If you guys want more of this content, be sure to let me know, and I'll be sure to give it to you. For those who are wondering or watching this on YouTube, this was on Twitch. It was a live stream I did, and I went again. I normally go. I try to go almost every day, around 6 to 7 CDT. I go for about 3 hours. So yeah, if you want more of this content, let me know. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching this on Twitch and you wonder what I'm talking about YouTube right now, most of these broadcasts, including this one, will go up on my YouTube channel, Halos 2131. So you can go check it out there if you're joining me now, or you're watching this from my video producer on Twitch that you wanted to see the full thing in great detail. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. If you want more of this content, let me know, and I'll be sure to give it to you. Click like button, subscribe, because Spartan today. Halos out. Bye.